Hi everyone! If you enjoy my content and want more videos, support me in Ko-fi. The link in the description. Chapter 451. Celebration Invitation. Yuan City, the core area of the territory. Rise. General Duo La's voice sank into his dantian as he mimicked the stance of pulling out a radish with his hands forming a circle. The next moment, accompanied by a slight tremor, the training field building nearby slowly freed itself from the earth, enveloped by the elements of heaven and earth. Gravel and dust fell through the air as Duo Lai gently spread his hands wide, carefully relocating the miracle building as if too much force might crush the entire structure. Yuan City was undergoing some relocations. The early construction of Yuan City had little planning, as there was no capacity for it at the time. Now, however, as Yuan City continued to expand, rare-level buildings like training fields no longer needed to be placed in the core urban area. The sky was clear, and peace prevailed in Yuan City. In the core area, Duo Lai dragged the building to the southern suburbs of the city. Instantly, a construction crew came under the leadership of the person in charge to repair the relocated building. In the distance, Liu Lu manifested the shadow of a giant, bent down to pick up an arrow tower as if it were a large chess piece, and placed it elsewhere. Half a day later. It's about done, the first phase of the project is temporarily concluded. Yuan clapped his hands and took out the epic building that had recently come into his possession. Ice and Fire Double Heaven Fire. This epic building could not be constructed within the Dragon Mound Fertile Land Secret Realm, or to put it another way, the stature of the Dragon Mound Secret Realm alone could not support the vast energy needed by the epic building. Ice and Fire Double Heaven Fire needed to be rooted in the earth. Rise. The epic building model in his hand slowly lifted. The next moment, an invisible force descended, smoothing out the earth in the area before him, and repelling all insectoid life forms within its range. A faint outline of the building then emerged and quickly solidified. Stay connected via Empire. In the blink of an eye. Ding! Notification: you have completed the construction of the epic building Ice and Fire Double Heaven Fire, details can be checked at your discretion. This was a complete building model, not just blueprints. Yuan did not need to invest his materials nor did he need to spend manpower and time to build it. Once it touched the ground, the work was done. There's a saying that these natural, complete epic buildings are unique. Many epic buildings have a distinct uniqueness, perhaps other epic buildings have similar abilities, but there will be some differences, more or less. Ice and Fire Double Heaven Fire might just be a unique epic. A high-level mage tower, on the other hand, is likely not unique. The prefix high level is what stands out here. But a unique epic does not necessarily mean it is more powerful than a non-unique one. If Yuan had to choose between Ice and Fire Double Heaven and a high-level mage tower, he would likely opt for the latter. For Yuan City at present, an epic mage tower that can serve as a trump card and a core part of the city's strength clearly holds more strategic value. Before him, the simple stone steps wove forward, winding into the mountain filled with brown-red rocks. After climbing dozens of steps, stone walls carved rather roughly came into view, and they bore some ancient, obscure symbols. What are these? All squiggly and weird. Duo Lai glanced at them for 2 seconds before looking away. Ilo said, these are probably text from the Lava Ancient Country. Duo Lai, the Lava Ancient Country. Ilo, it was a nation founded by the lava giants in ancient times, once quite a powerful force. However, it seems that even before the scourge of corruption descended, the Lava Ancient Country had already perished, a quite distant nation. I happened to see it mentioned in some research literature. Duo Lai looked at the wise lord with a questioning gaze. Yuan stood with his hands behind his back, gazing up at a 45 degrees angle. That's right. Probably. The Ice and Fire Double Heaven training building did not appear very large from the outside, being about the size of 6 football fields. But the Ice and Fire Double Heaven Fire they saw from the outside seemed to be just an entrance. Beyond the stone walls, following a small path into it, a range of mountains gradually came into view. These mountains varied in height, bizarre and magnificent, with many different shapes of flames bursting from distant mountaintops, and then vanishing in the blink of an eye. It's getting hotter. Not just hot, an invisible fire is scorching our souls, our will. The deeper inside, the stronger the scorch, and the more potent the effect on training. This training building had a relatively high threshold for use. For the vast majority of professionals, who are stuck at the elite level for life, they could not use this treasure for training. A slight mishap could lead to scorching, leaving deep and hard-to-heal foundational injuries. But, for the fourth-order strongman, for the legendary realm, such potent effects were just right. Mu Yuan quickly toured the interior of Ice and Fire Double Heaven Fire. The area was not small, almost larger than the main district of Tianyuan City. Inside, it was simply divided into several different types and levels of training areas. We could also make a more detailed plan for this place. Mu Yuan already had some ideas in mind. This epic building perfectly met the training needs of the Tianyuan division. In the future, if Tianyuan City grew even larger, becoming famous in both Taishan and the world, such a training building could also be opened to the public, generating substantial ticket revenue. Many great lords did this. What they earned was not just money. In Taishan, official large cities had numerous training buildings to satisfy the needs of the vast majority of lords. The alliance also had its set of market standards. Local lords could adjust prices, which might be more expensive but not outrageously so. However, beyond Taishan, many freelancing lords lack cultivation grounds of their own, so they can only borrow from the great lords of their regions. This turns the market completely in favor of the sellers. What borrowing lords often need to give up is not just money, it might be dignity, body, or something else. After Tianyuan City revealed its fierce side and eradicated the Pillar of Filth, a week had swiftly passed. The entire 10 Directions Island domain seemed exceptionally calm. This time, it was truly peaceful. The remnants of the Black Crow clan and Blood Snake Encase were almost completely annihilated. Monsters of legendary realm lurking within the 10 Directions Island domain still existed, perhaps 1 or 2, or maybe 3, but they were unable to cause any waves. Even the forces of the Natural Garden and Giant Stone Ridge had the power to defeat these 2 or 3 legendary beings on their own. But as the Black Crow and Blood Serpent could not stir up waves, Dragon Sleep Valley required extra vigilance. Yet, after a week passed, Dragon Sleep Valley seemed to remain quiet. What is the enemy thinking? Is it not easy to leave the Red Mist Land, or is there some other scheme brewing? But we cannot be completely restrained by the enemy, we can't match wits and bravery with thin air. Tianyuan City now has 7 Army Soul Corps. The Skeleton Legion alone, with both its regular and nearly regular force, numbers over 2,000. The 7 Army Soul Corps, with the warriors who have regular force benefits, total over 10,000 in number. This 10,000 elite, the basic cultivation for a month costs 3,000 soul crystals. Discover stories at Empire. But they have regular force benefits, and factoring in soul sand and auxiliary materials, the cost at least doubles to 6,000 per month. The elites who have reached the 4-order peak do not need to continue extracting soul power for cultivation, but the expenses for refining their bodies are only greater, not less. Beyond that, the cultivation expenses of division generals are even higher, and practicing some epic skills often requires the use of precious treasures. Tianyuan City also has construction, development, civilian life, equipment manufacturing, research, and other costly projects. The monthly expenses of Tianyuan City are at least a couple of 10,000s, with no cap on the upper limit. Even with a few large mines at home, and even with many gifts from nature, he couldn't withstand such constant expenditure. No wonder many powerful lords only have 1 or 2 Army Soul Corps under their command. Mu Yuan instructed the exploratory team to continue expanding the territory of the 10 Directions Island domain, striving to uncover more valuable lands. However, mere exploration and monster hunting profits are indeed not considered much for Tianyuan City at present. He still needed to increase revenue sources. Mu Yuan selected a group of 4-order high stage and 4-order peak vanguards from various corps and sent them to the Hang Mountain Great War Zone, assigning them under the command of Rakshasa and Yuta. At the same time, he had Ilo select several staff members from within the territory and sent them along. Lord Shepherd also occasionally paid attention to the situation there, his gaze able to reach the Great War Zone, focusing on the Guardian camp where Rakshasa and the others were stationed. Hang Mountain Great War Zone. At this time, there was no scarlet mist tide moving southward, and though there was no major warfare, minor conflicts were continuous. Since Rakshasa and Yuta had been stationed in the Guardian camp, the camp had already faced 8 large-scale monster wave assaults, with legendary realm monsters often lurking within. However, no accidents occurred. Under the defense of Rakshasa and Yuta, the entire Guardian camp remained firmly held, with not even a section of the wall collapsing. During that time, the Guardian camps on the periphery of Base City No. 2 sounded distress signals a few times. At such times, it would usually be Rakshasa herself continuing to defend the camp, while Yuddha and Rakshasa's good body cut through the waves, rushing to the rescue with a sprint speed far surpassing ordinary legendary beings. When the two arrived at the battlefield, Yuddha would punch out the legendary realm monster, breaking the critical situation. Great War Zone, routine meeting. The division generals responsible for the 3 logistic bases reported one after the other. This month in our base number 1, we've lost a total of 2 guardian camps, with 3 legendary warriors fallen, and a total military loss of. Our base number 2 has not witnessed any guardian camps being overrun this month. Not only that, but our zone number 2 defense area has killed as many as 27 legendary monsters during this period. Of course, they were all only heaven and earth realm legends. A few division generals glanced sideways. Not having a camp overrun and slaying 27 legendary monsters, neither of these outcomes would be considered rare on their own, but when combined, they represented quite commendable military achievements. The zone number 2 defense area hasn't seen any major changes recently. A defending general schemed through the documents and then exclaimed, "At 6 legendary creatures slain in front of the Tianyuan encampment. In the Great War Zone, countless legendary monsters were torn apart in just 1 month. However, this doesn't mean that slaying creatures of the legendary realm is as simple as butchering sheep, it's just that there were many legendary monsters in the war zones, and with such a large base number, naturally, a significant number of kills occurred. All the defending generals understood just how difficult it was to kill a creature of such legendary status. They would flee and hide. Unless it was during the Red Fog disaster moon, these legends weren't so recklessly brave. However, this Tianyuan general named Rakshasa, being able to pick out the faceless ones from the vast crowd and root out the hidden legendary monsters, must not be too challenging, right? The general thus convinced himself. Another general, who was looking at the data, laughed and said, "It's not only 6 kills, within the Tianyuan defense area, there are 6, but Tianyuan's Yuddha, who provided reinforcements to other camps and also killed 7 legendary monsters, has a total of 7 kills. In 1 month, 13 legendary monsters were slain. Nearly half of the whole kill count for zone number 2 defense area. This is a newly minted legend. What kind of trials did Lord Tianyuan put them through to cultivate such 2 unparalleled fierce generals? With their abilities, they indeed have the capacity to command another special patrol corps. I never thought that we old fellows would have inferior insight compared to a young girl. Ha ha ha, that's why you and I are just generals, while others have already become commanders. Lord, at yesterday's meeting, many generals were praising your unique vision. The Defender's Mansion, a fortress. A civil officer of the Cold Moon territory hopped in and chirped. City Lord Lu Zio lifted her chin slightly and said, "Naturally, so, what's the situation?" "It's about Yuddha and Rakshasa, with their unparalleled combat power. Especially Yuddha, who despite being a newly advanced legend from a domain lacking resources, is said to have combat power comparable to the peak of the heaven and earth realm." Several generals said that these 2 are very capable of holding dual responsibilities. Ah! Lu Zio pondered. Here she was thinking about poaching a few promising youngsters from the Tianyuan lad. But it seemed that just 2 Tianyuan commanders had taken care of everything. Compared to Rakshasa, Yuddha had his striking military achievements. Meanwhile, Hong Yi's life seemed calm and uneventful. But tranquility was the norm for the logistics transport team. Most of the time, the transport team wouldn't encounter legendary ambushes. Hong Yi's routine was to lie in the wagon and sleep soundly, occasionally using the ability to make the false appear real to grow vegetables, enhancing the transport team's rations. The whole transport team greatly respected the boss, Hong Yi. Who wouldn't want to follow a leader who could fight, provide support, and was low maintenance? Hong Yi also liked this life where she could sleep 99% of the time and didn't even need to walk. The accompanying nature spirit grass twig's head drooped. This was nothing like the life she had imagined. She only wanted to engage in battles. At Tian's Academy in Tian City, instructors Irene, Zhou Yi, and Sanghun, who were teaching and learning simultaneously, had concluded their 2.5-month tenure and were en route back to Tianyuan. The 3, especially Irene, received strong appeals for them to stay. Irene, holding a space suitcase, saluted and said, "I am forever a person of Tianyuan City. I'm merely following the plan to return, but our Lord still has plans to continue our cooperation with your academy." Several days later, Tianyuan City, at the entrance of the new South City Gate. Mu Yuan arrived here to welcome the first group of Tianyuan elites returning from their teaching and study abroad. "We're back. Our own little city feels so familiar. Hold on, isn't this city gate a tiny bit different from when we left? After all, this was the gate for the new city area, not at all the same as the old South City gate. After exchanging pleasantries and sharing their academy experiences, Irene took out an invitation with a soft glow and golden embossing. Lord, this is an invitation from the association, inviting our territory to participate in the celebration and to have our Army Corps join the parade ceremony, Irene said. Indeed, it was about time. Chapter 452. Quotas, representatives of each session. The Taishan celebration, the news of the parade review had been known by Mu Yuan long ago. Probably around the time Yuan City defeated Fang of the Jackal Wolf and officially had a stable foundation in the 10 Directions Island domain. The 6-month period from the beginning is now only 2 months away, so formal announcements and invitations are indeed due. Information in the Tianyuan territory was relatively enclosed. Just a few days ago, various official associations released announcements one after another, stating that this August, Taishan would hold a real military review celebration, a national celebration to commemorate the true establishment of the Taishan Alliance. At that time, the alliance would select a batch of Lord representatives to participate in the parade and also invite major powers from the eternal world to observe. 1. To stabilize the people's hearts, build confidence and inspire fighting spirit. 2. To show off power, deter the insignificant, and enhance international discourse. For Lord representatives, this is even more invaluable as a stage to showcase themselves before the whole of Taishan and the world. For lords, renown is very important. In the eternal world's miracle territories, there are countless ones, and when investing or trading, many big shots will first choose which territory. At least, they will opt for a territory they have heard of. For young lords eager to advance, such an opportunity is truly once in a lifetime. So, I really want this spot as a representative lord. In the public secret realm, Zhang Loxing propped his hands on the table, impassioned yet helpless. Among our generation, only Lu Miamu, Wan Furteng and Tianyuan God can be directly selected as representatives. Lu Miamu and Wan Furteng, well, he couldn't compete with them anyway. Lu Miamu, too, is a regular in the secret realm. Zhang Loxing was well aware that this peer had already trained a 4th Order Division General and possessed notable combat power himself, already showing a bit of the Lord of Hanyu City's style from the past. It's said that Wan Furteng is even more formidable, already possessing several 4th Order generals. Setting aside Tianyuan, this Lord Wangba is the undisputed top of their cohort, and by a landslide at that. Zhang Loxing dropped his head. Yuan Ju, I too really want to be a representative lord, it would be so prestigious to walk there. Not long ago, after receiving the invitation, Mu Yuan naturally received Jiang's phone call, to join him in the secret realm to listen to Jiang's grievances. About this matter, he knew more insider information than both Zhang and Lu combined. He said, the representative lords of our cohort, according to reason, should not only be 3, more are likely to continue being selected. In fact, it was 2. What he represented had long surpassed just being the 121st trial lord of Taishan. Besides, the alliance's selection wasn't based on cohorts, which is meaningless. Instead, they typically choose representatives from the youth period, young period, mature period, and elderly period, and so on. Their cohort represented the young lords, and counting 6 or 7 periods up, people like Ba Long, Wuji, were also young generation lords. And their cohort was called the most outstanding one in several years. Not to mention Ba Long and Lu Miamu, even outstanding lords like Zhang Loxing, Shen Lei, Yu Shi, and Zhuang Tian were gradually catching up and exceeding the top lords of the previous or the one before last cohorts. It's out, the first batch of representative names are released. A bespectacled young man typed frenetically onto the holographic screen. This holographic screen device seemed to connect to the official website of the first-tier official association, possessing the latest information. He read aloud, Lord Nanshan, Flowing Arrow Lord, Cold Moon Lord, Evening Elephant Lord, Panstone Lord, White Shark Lord, Tianyuan Lord, Lord Linglong, Tenglong Lord, Lord Wuji, Lord Ba Long, Lord Wangba, Lord of Huanchao, Feather Moon Lord. Who is this Feather Moon Lord? Feather Moon is not from our cohort. This must be the representative of the youngest generation lords, the one who just underwent the trial a few months ago. Following their cohort, in theory, there were 2 more cohorts of newcomers. However, due to the integration with Langxing, one cohort was missed. Feather Moon's cohort is the newest, the youngest group of lords. This cohort is also the first group of lords who had their trials after our integration with Langxing, with the rules being slightly different from before. The guy tapping on the screen said, "Don't be fooled by the small number of people in this cohort. Each and every one of them is incredibly strong, especially the Feather Moon Lord who topped the gold list. She too is strong in a groundbreaking way, and she also comes from an ordinary background. She has now earned the nickname Little Tian Yuan." Mu Yuan touched the tip of his nose, feeling as if he had become a benchmark for future generations to measure against. This feeling wasn't bad at all. The bespectacled guy continued, "Furthermore, the association has also announced the latest news that they will indeed continue to select a second and third batch of representative lords. Zhang Loxing. There really are more spots." His face lit up with joy, but it quickly fell. "How are they selecting? It's not going to be a fight, is it?" But he always felt that no matter how they were selected, he would be left out. Find exclusive stories on Empire. Looking at the list of representatives, who were all big shots, even the great lords seemed unimpressive inside, let alone a small fry like him. Going through the list, the only one he felt confident he could defeat was Feather Moon Lord. He'd go for broke competing. Mu Yuan spoke up, "Don't panic, the selection is definitely not going to be a fight. It's a military review, after all, they have to consider the military demeanor and appearance. At least a miscellaneous brand army definitely won't pass the screening, even if that army is strong. Based on my estimation, this selection is definitely somewhat biased in favor of the young lords, so strive on, young man." Lu Miamu indicated that she would lead her Huan Chao Spring Spirit Corps to participate in the ceremonial military parade. She had already started the preparations, which weren't difficult. "After all, in my domain, the real force I can show off is just a few hundred spring spirits. Spring spirits are quite unique and rare, at least they won't be drowned out in the tide of soldiers," she said. She wasn't wrong. The parade has certain requirements for the troops of the lords participating. Basically, they must not be disorderly. It's not acceptable if my troops include 6 goblin leaders, 7 jackal man chieftains, 8 lava giants, and 9 earth rock dragons. Such troops might be strong, but they are far from neat and disciplined, they'd look more like a motley crew. Participating troops must have a certain establishment. They don't need to be of the same species, but at least they should be able to work together. On such a basis, lords can freely choose what types of troops they wish to lead in the parade. Basically, every lord hopes their troops can be eye-catching and attract attention. And the majority of lords will inevitably choose human troops for participation. In a crowd of humans, the appearance of the water blue, seemingly water-made spring spirits, how could they not stand out? Mu Yuan found himself in a dilemma. Which troop should he bring to participate? To be honest, all the troops wanted to show themselves and were suitable to do so. However, if we're talking about special, the Skeleton Legion doesn't stand out in appearance. They are all enveloped in full body armor. At first glance, they look no different from regular human elites. It's not as though they can parade without armor, can they? That would be the human equivalent of streaking. The Treeman troops are even less appropriate. Mu Yuan also had no intention of revealing any epic divinity. The giant dragon swordsmen are a pretty good choice though. They look sufficiently robust and majestic, and the invisible dragon force reflected in their eyes adds much honor and grandeur to them. Merely 50 giant dragon swordsmen, dragon force swordsmen of course aren't enough to form a troop. That's no problem though. When the time comes, just handpick a batch of elites to fill in. However, assembling the parade's troops, manufacturing the standard uniforms, the drills of the elites, scheduling the trip to Taishan capital, these things must be done as soon as possible. There's still plenty of work to get busy with. Ah, more things to get busy with. That night, in the core region of the domain, inside the high-grade residence of a rare building, Ilo let out a groundhog-like roar, devoid of any semblance of Tian Yuan's top civil officer. This was the residence of Irene and Daisy. Ilo would occasionally come to freeload too. As Irene was sorting through books, she asked, "What's the matter now, has Lord given you more tasks?" Ilo replied, "Yes, indeed, treating me like a workhorse, and I haven't even finished the tasks from before. Really, everything is being pushed onto me. Didn't Lord promise you that you'd assemble a team of civil officers? Are you still short of manpower?" "Short? Of course, we're short. The domain is expanding, and all over, we need educated workers, mining areas also need officials in charge of statistics and coordination. There are needs for liaisons with elves and giants, as well as officials stationed in Shilling City, Panchi City, neighboring Great Domains. Even the Great War Zone needs civil personnel to assist. The new people coming out of training aren't enough to fill all the departments everywhere. How can I not be short of manpower in such a situation? Ilo laid her chin on a soft pillow, her head drooping and eyes half closed as if drained of vitality. Irene closed her book and walked over to the bed, patting Ilo's head. But you enjoy this, don't you? You're now Lord's right-hand man. You've achieved your original dream. Who enjoys this? Ilo turned her eyes aside. You have no idea, right now, I still have 9 avatars working. And it's 11 o'clock at night. Working late into the night, what's the difference between that and suicide? Then Irene began to say something. However, Ilo stared at the pillow in front of her, her expression not one of distress. However, who told us that our domain lacks manpower? I then can only work harder, being overworked in service to our Lord. Irene said, with your efficiency, I reckon Lord will soon arrange for you to undergo evolution baptism, right? Ilo looked indifferent. I am a civil officer. What good does it do me to become stronger? I don't go to the battlefield, I don't fight. But you still long to be strong, don't deny it. You once modified your body to become stronger. You're not like me, you have the talent and the will to fight. Irene swung her hand. On this return, I also received a baptism to evolve to epic 2 stars, and I've even saved up quite a bit towards the next stage. Ilo looked in her direction. Irene hopped off the bed and half crouched with her palms on the ground. An aura of ferocity spread around her. She looked like a wolf bathed in moonlight, fierce yet sacred. Read New Adventures at Empire. Ilo was surprised. That's Lian Yu's power. That's right. Irene's aura of the moonwolf quickly dissipated as she stood up and pointed to her heart. My awakened epic talent is called Heart Source Integration, which allows me to rapidly learn and master others' combat methods by experiencing their energy flows. Paired with the Eye of Memory, there is almost nothing I can't learn. She demonstrated several more skills, truly a master of all kinds of martial arts. However, she said, I can learn anything and become proficient in it, but how well I can perform a skill still depends on my own qualities. I can imitate Lian Yu's combat method, but my physical quality is far inferior to hers. My imitation is only form without substance. When it comes to actual combat, I'm easily exposed. In simple terms, she had already mastered hundreds of skills to the mastery level, but her attributes remained unchanged. Moreover, her attributes were not high, considered low level among the epics. After all, she was just a fragile woman. But this is exactly what suits you. Ilo said. Irene was also a civil officer. And the 2 epic abilities that Irene had awakened were exactly useful in her area of work. The baptism bestowed upon Irene by the Lord was both valuable and meaningful. Your next journey awaits at Empire. Unlike her own, the abilities she had awakened were of little use in her daily work. River of Stars, Starry Eyes, Destiny Star Weaving. She hadn't been able to demonstrate much of their value. She wasn't a fighter anyway. To evolve me was really a waste. The next day, in Yuan City's south, in the old district's municipal building, Ilo herself punched in for work on time, taking over the work content from her avatar. She brewed herself a cup of coffee and began a new day's work. Soon. Lady Ilo, these are documents sent from the city lord's mansion. A staff member delivered a new pile of tasks to be handled. Ilo sighed softly. After a while. Lady Ilo, the Lord has sent new instructions regarding the construction issues of the new North District. Ilo rubbed her swelling head. Lady Ilo. Lady Ilo. Lady Ilo. Outside the window, the sunlight grew increasingly charming, and the pile of documents on the desk mounted higher. Ilo clenched her fist. In the coffee cup set aside, the liquid began to ripple. Then, a figure walked in. She glanced in awe. It was the detestable Lord. Don't tell me there are more tasks. Not that there can't be, but today there really aren't any. Lord Shepherd was also seriously working. But well, the capable are always busier. Ilo could take on the roles of dozens of senior officials, who could resist not using her. He cleared his throat. Today I have some good news to inform you. In view of your contributions to the territory, the organization has decided to bestow upon you the baptism of legend, and you might even get to take a 2-day leave. After finishing his statement, he realized that Ilo didn't seem too excited. Why not give this opportunity to someone else? Lu, Sophia, or Yuta, Serio, Xilu. They all need combat abilities more than I do. They are more suitable. Mu Yuan watched the girl in front of him. This is what you deserve, and you are equally suitable. Haven't you always been curious about legends? It's always more thorough to study oneself. But don't deny your own desires. Irene had said something similar too. Moreover, said the Lord, who says your combat abilities are useless? You were the one who dealt with the faceless ones. If Lu had taken action, he couldn't have subdued that faceless one without affecting the surroundings. You want to treat me as a multi-purpose ox to be used at will. She sighed heavily. But eventually, the corners of her mouth curled up in a pleased smile. Although she was heavily used, although there would surely be a pile of work on the way, although the Lord might take the opportunity to slack off, this feeling of being affirmed, of being trusted. It wasn't bad at all. Golden sunlight shone in, casting its radiance on her face, her smile as bright as the sunlight itself. All right, it was time to do some experiments on her own body. Chapter 453. Master of the Starry Skies, Lord of the Stars. Having witnessed the great force of legendary life, Ilo already understood that trying to improve evolution effects through human body transformation just wasn't feasible. How could the feeble efforts of humans compare to the exalted legends? At least, she didn't have that ability for now. But lacking the ability didn't mean she had lost her original intention. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so how could she waste it and let it slip by? 3 days later. When Mu Yuan saw Ilo herself again, he barely recognized her. You are ruthless. He choked up for a moment and could only utter such words. At this time, one of Ilo's eyes was already completely hollow, the eyeball inside had disappeared, replaced by an array that hung in the dark eye socket, looking somewhat like a miniaturized version of the Starry Eyes constellation chart. Below the eye socket, a blue streak was branded onto her cheek, extending down, passing over her snow-white neck and disappearing into her collar. After all, Mr. Mu could only say that as long as she was happy with her peculiar hobby. He turned up his palm. The colorful Evo power visible only to him trickled like a stream. Evolution points, 105W. When the vanguard army from Dragon Sleep Valley arrived and erected the Pillar of Filth, Mu Yuan had already considered evolving Ilo. Ilo had the ability of astral observation. Admittedly, the position of the Pillar of Filth was very high, but if Ilo stepped into legend, perhaps she could also obtain some clues related to the location of the Pillar of Filth by observing her life star. By doing so, he would have an additional preventive measure. However, at that time, he had only 45W evolution points left, and 50W for a legendary evolution was just an entry ticket. According to his usual style, without reserving 100W evolution points, he would not commence a legendary evolution. Duo-Las evolution had cost 68W. As a devouring slime, Duo-Lai was a rather special individual, theoretically possessing unlimited potential. If it kept devouring and lived long enough, and was fortunate enough, it had the possibility of transforming into legendary life on its own strength. Compared to Duo-Lai, Ilo, Lu, and the other division generals were almost just ordinary people. Thus, Lord Shepherd had a lot to consider. 105W, barely acceptable. Mu Yuan checked all the equipment to ensure they were functioning smoothly before starting the evolution. The secret realm of Dragon Mound Fertile Land was completely sealed off. The domain interferer hummed as it operated. The advanced mage tower, presided over by Duo-Lai, was laid out above the secret realm. And Lord Shepherd, after scattering the miracle light, began his miserable substitute work life. There are still too few capable people in the territory, Mr. Mu sighed. He had tried to bring Lu over to share the burden, since Lu was among the division generals more familiar with the affairs of Tianyuan City. However, after trying, Mu Yuan silently waved Lu away. He did not want to increase his workload. Lord Shepherd was hard-working and diligent. Lord Shepherd worked late into the night. Lord Shepherd. Lord, here is the coffee you requested, and also, here is a batch of documents from the patrol team, someone said. Experience more on Empire. Mu Yuan's hand, while receiving the coffee, paused mid-air. Why does the work keep piling up? He examined the personnel transfers of the patrol teams, the construction of the new district, the establishment of Yuan City Academy, and other reports, silent for a moment before smiling again. Unwittingly, my Yuan territory has become quite a sizable city, he remarked. He elevated his view. The night in Yuan City still had thousands of lights. The gates of the city lord's mansion were decorated with brightly lit lanterns on the ancient trees, and further away on the streets of the city district, lanterns also dispersed warm and bright light. The river water flowed gurgling under the arch bridge. The patrolling soldiers were upright and imposing. A blue bird landed on the spacious square. Nobody was afraid. The children cautiously approached to touch it, and one of them even offered their uneaten sugar gourd. The academy's night school echoed with reading. The soldiers of the barracks gathered around the campfire, playing games with cheers and shouts. Yuan looked on. Good. It is time to crush the great enemy before us, he declared. Countless documents flew into mid-air and rustled as they opened up. Lord Shepherd raised an eyebrow, ready to fight through another night. As expected, ILO's evolution continued for a day and a night with no significant changes. Just like with Duolas evolution before. The secret realm was sealed, and Yuan's attention turned there. By this point, apart from the initial deduction of 50W evolution points, he started to hear prompts of 1000, 1000 ringing near his ear. The waters of the lake of evolution were gushing forth. Yuan watched quietly, as time slowly ticked away. Evo power 1000. Evo power 1000. The change didn't take long to start appearing. ILO's domain emerged naturally and began to break limits, expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. Whispers of an essence surpassing epics, elusive, exalted, noble, and mysterious, diffused and momentarily shook the heavens and the earth, causing storms to rise. The sky darkened, then started to brighten with slivers of light. It was starlight. The starlight grew more brilliant, illuminating the night sky. What should have been daytime entered into deep night in the blink of an eye, with the sky full of stars on display. The night under the stars was long. Hours later, the domain power surrounding ILO had already reached a radius of 4,377 meters. At that moment, the dazzling light of evolution burst forth once again, piercing the clouds. Ding! Reminder, your hero ILO is bathed in the miracle light, undergoing transformation. Hint, ILO's epic skill River of Stars has been upgraded to River of Starry Sky, with a significant increase in the coverage of the Star River, allowing for a greatly increased number of stars to be contained. A majestic river of stars stretched high above ILO's head. In the blink of an eye, the Star River expanded several to dozens of times, resembling a sea of stars that propped up the entire night sky. Hint, ILO's epic talent Starry Eyes has been upgraded, the talent's passive benefits have been enhanced, and its observational capabilities have improved. ILO's spiritual power and willpower advanced once again amid evolution. She sat on the lotus platform, the dazzling patterns of light that once adorned her had already vanished, and her hollow eye sockets had been filled. The miniature circular arrays that resembled her starry eyes within her pupils had disappeared. But at this moment, as she opened her eyes, still immersed in the experience of evolution, her gaze was lifeless yet still seemed like two stars hanging high in the azure sky, overlooking the world below. Hint, ILO's epic talent Destiny Star Weaving has been promoted, possessing even greater influence. When ILO's body, life, and soul ascended to the pinnacle of epic, when all three epic abilities underwent metamorphosis, when the miraculous power breached the final barrier, legendary visions and celebrations from heaven and earth arrived in succession. ILO became a legend. Yuan City now boasted three great legends. Hint, your hero ILO has evolved from Destiny Star Weaver, epic 3 stars, to Starry Sky Holder, legendary 1 star, undergoing a tremendous transformation, and awakening the legendary power. Authority of the Starry Sky. In the process. Description, when ILO gazes at the starry sky is her backyard. Ability, ILO can hang stars in the starry sky, the stars being an extension of her power. At the current stage, ILO can possess up to 6 stars. Ability, bathed in starlight, ILO possesses endless energy. Ability, there are 4 seasons in the sky, but all are ruled by the starry sky. ILO can make the starry sky permanent. At the current stage, ILO can only affect a certain range of area. Ability, authority of the starry sky. Most of the time, ILO holds the supreme scepter of the starry sky, unshakable by anyone. Compared to Duolas simplistic and brute force, Deadbone's still comprehensible legendary abilities, ILO's are a bit more enigmatic. At first glance, it seems to merely enhance the breadth of Ilo's power, without making the height increase obviously. However, legendary powers certainly aren't that simple. Among them, the core ability is probably the fourth point, authority of the starry sky. If Ilo steps into the legendary lore realm, this power could provide immense convenience, even now. This is also a dominant in internal battles skill. Stellar abilities are not rare. Perhaps at the ordinary, rare rank, stellar abilities are scarce, but as one reaches excellence in epic tier, many abilities will involve the starry sky. Sophia's night is related to the starry sky. Lian Yu's moonlight also exists against the backdrop of the starry sky. 17's arrow of polar star is even governed by the starry sky. In one of the 7 great nations, the Yongxing Empire, its signature epic is largely comprised of starry sky troop type. Just as Ilo was officially promoted to legendary status, Lord Shepherd, who was still gazing out from within the city lord's mansion, suddenly changed his expression. This feeling. His consciousness began to rising without end. His domain also spread out, enveloping more than 1,000 meters around him before starting to break through limits, expanding at a visible speed. Yuan quickly stood up, flying out of the city lord's mansion and entering the nearby epic building Ice and Fire Double Heaven Fire. His consciousness became more and more hazy, with his entire being in a profoundly mysterious state. He saw light, witnessed miracles, and glimpsed eternity. These visions soon disappeared, leaving only an ever more vast spiritual power, with his web of spirit radiating all around. Vaguely, he discovered that he could draw the epic power of his own division generals through the web of spirit, and the upper limit was even higher. 2.5 hours later, Yuan slowly came to his senses, deep in thought. Is it over so soon? Did I actually evolve or not? The advancement of troop types can provide a certain feedback effect to the lords. The closer the connection, the greater the feedback effect. However, as the power and status of the lords gradually increase, such feedback becomes increasingly inconspicuous. In his earlier years, when Yuan evolved Dead Bone, and Duolai stepped into epic, he did not transform to epic status as quickly. But just now, Lord Shepherd let his domain disperse, with the radius of his domain now at 4,001 meters, a substantial increase. He could also clearly perceive that his control over the elements of heaven and earth and his understanding of the whole world had improved dramatically. He could even faintly grasp the concept of what a concept is. However, my transformation was too short-lived. If I were a legend, there probably wouldn't be such a mediocre one. I don't possess legendary power, nor have there been any heaven and earth phenomena, or sounds of celebration to herald my arrival. Of course, when he first stepped into the epic rank, it was after his own series of tests, where he discovered he had reached and even exceeded the basic level of the epic tier. His own epic characteristics were not very apparent, and he hadn't awakened any epic skills. He seemed to be a rather special individual. That day, there were no golden meteors streaking across the sky, but if someone were to observe carefully, they could notice that the stars in the daytime sky were extra bright, twinkling with a mysterious light. The methods of star observation of powerful forces like the Yongxing Empire. None detected it. The birth of this legend was very low-key, known by very few. But above the eternal continent, in the deepest reaches of the starry sky, here, the stars twinkled, and a great being composed of countless star bodies, indescribable in its magnificence, existed here for eons. Around this great existence, there were beings shrouded in starlight, orbiting it like satellites. They bore special concepts. Star's apostle. Suddenly, it opened its eyes. A noble starry life has been born. It was not surprised, for it couldn't possibly hold all the authority of the starry sky, and naturally, other starry legends would appear. However, it vaguely felt that this new starry legend was related to itself and should be one of its apostles. But when it traced the bloodline, nothing was found. It, standing at the pinnacle of the starry sky and ruling over the stars, couldn't possibly miss an interwoven bloodline within its gaze. It must be an illusion. The being in the starry sky murmured, pushing aside the feeling as if it had missed something. Then, it turned its gaze back to the eternal world. Find your next read at Empire. Let's sow some more seeds. The power of concept stretched out, the great force of bloodline mingled within, and its invisible influence quietly took place over dozens, hundreds, thousands of great domains. Deep in the wilderness, a certain monster suddenly awakened to the power of starlight, roaring up at the sky. Within a great city, a high school student undergoing an awakening ceremony burst into laughter, it's an A-grade talent, starlight body. Yongxing Empire. A certain distinguished prince approached a 6th-tier troops building with a desperate gambit, pouring all his recruitment slots into it. After a while, he was surprised, ecstatic, and he laughed joyously to the heavens. 2 arrow of polar stars, 1 red star king knight, 1 triphase star body, what a steal, a huge steal. No, it's as if the heavens and earth are favoring this prince. Some people awakened to excellent talents, some recruited epic troop types, some acquired their 3rd legendary division general. Everyone's future was very bright. So, have you figured out your legendary ability yet? Mostly. Ilo said, to mention something you care about, the number of permanent avatars I have has increased from 13 to over 100, and each of them can be put to work like oxen and horses. Oh, that's quite an improvement, cough cough. Mu Yuan waved his hand, was he that kind of lord? Indeed he was. Ilo continued, legendary power is truly inconceivable. Even though I am still weak, I can already influence through the legendary power, training the starlight scholars who have transitioned through me, one step at a time, up to epic. Of course, she knew this wasn't very useful. She also knew what kind of power the Lord more eagerly desired. Look! A scepter formed of starlight materialized in her hand. She tapped the ground lightly with the scepter in hand. Suddenly, a grand gate enshrouded in starlight opened before them. Mu Yuan followed Ilo through the gate of starlight and in the blink of an eye, arrived hundreds of kilometers away at the Dragon Head Mountain Fortress. Chapter 454. The Army Corps sets out, upholding the name of Tianyuan. A week later. In the city lord's mansion of Tianyuan City. Our territory is quite far from the capital of Xian country, so we need to set out a bit earlier. During this time, the affairs and safety of our territory will be entrusted to you all, said Mu Yuan. He looked towards the various division generals present. Some were sitting, some were lying down, and some were hanging from trees or flying in the sky. Hanging from a tree was June, while Sario was flying above. Its body was so large that no tree in the courtyard of the city lord's mansion could support it, so it could only fly in mid-air, staring down dryly. The dead bone was also present at the meeting. It was located in the outer regions and traveling back and forth was time-consuming. Unless necessary, dead bone wouldn't make a special trip back. After all, the sacred web of spirit connected everyone, allowing communication at any time and place. In terms of the lengthy journey, dead bone had always been concerned, as it could only rely on the method of astral projection to ensure his forces could support the homeland of the territory at any time, but this was ultimately inconvenient. Since Ilo had ascended to legend, this problem was no longer an issue. Ilo could use the stars as a medium to extend her power hundreds, thousands, and even hundreds of millions of kilometers away. Essentially, she had launched a satellite and entered the era of globalization. When Ilo went to the death domain and hung a celestial body in the night sky of the Wraith Sacred Mountain region, she was able to open the Starry Sky Gate, connecting the two places. What's special wasn't the Starry Sky Gate. Ilo had understood a bit of the teleportation method long ago. She had once repaired a broken array using her teleportation skills, linking two places. However, before her evolution, Ilo's teleportation skills were limited in spread, at most covering a few tens to hundreds of kilometers, which was somewhat of limited use. After evolving, Ilo's teleportation skills were also enhanced, advancing to the Starry Sky Gate, which had the ability to significantly increase the distance, effect, and spatial stability of teleportation by relying on starlight power. Even so, under normal circumstances, the teleportation of the Starry Sky Gate reaching a few hundred to 1,000 kilometers was already at its limit. Compared to teleporting tens of thousands of kilometers and spanning across great domains, it was the difference between a glowworm and the bright moon. Ilo couldn't do this with her power alone. But when she hung a celestial body high in the Wraith Sacred Mountain region, it was as though her power could be fully exerted in the outer regions. Relying on this, she cast spells at both ends, opening the doors of starlight in both places at the same time, and then connecting the space of these two star gates. Thus, she achieved cross-domain teleportation. Ilo's job functions got yet another +1. However, opening the Starry Sky Gate from such a long distance takes a significant toll on Ilo, and Mu Yuan did not intend to really have her act as the transport captain. The transport of a city and a territory couldn't only rely on the power of one person. The Starry Sky Gate would only be used at critical strategic moments, which would be enough. During the meeting, Lu spoke up. Lord, aside from the 50 giant dragon swordsmen and dragon force swordsmen, the rest of the elite have also been mobilized and are ready, he said. In fact, at the very beginning, the Tianyuan territory only had 48 dragon force swordsmen. Lord Shepherd thought this was very irregular, so he exchanged 2 remnant souls with excellence and other senior lords and great lords. Only then did they have a complete squad of 50 fighters. This time, he would lead 200 elite soldiers from Tianyuan City to participate in the military parade. The division general class powerhouses accompanying him. So far, General Duo Lai was confirmed. Duo Lai was someone who couldn't stay idle. Having Duo Lai with them was like carrying an incredibly huge space, which meant they no longer had to worry about not being able to bring enough items due to purchasing too much. Mu Yuan looked toward Dead Bone, Ilo, and the others. Dead Bone spoke up, "Bone won't go." With Duo Lai accompanying them, it felt relatively at ease. As for itself, its undead army was still expanding, so it was inconvenient to leave at this time. Moreover, it had no interest in the bustling human cities. On the contrary, it preferred quiet and secluded places. Ilo sighed, "I'm actually a bit interested, but can I leave? Besides, with Duo Lai going on a long journey with the Lord, and Dead Bone normally not being in Tianyuan City, and not always staying in the region of Wraith Sacred Mountain, Tianyuan City must have someone to guard it. A legend must stay behind." And she was one of the only 3 legends. Long before she evolved into a legend, she had made up her mind, the Lord didn't just want to use her as an office worker. Although, she was also willing to do so. "But I really want to see the outside society, to procure some research supplies, so I think I'll craft an avatar to go with you." "A starlight avatar? Can it sustain such a distance?" asked Mu Yuan. In the past, when the Tianyuan territory had not yet moved to the 10 Directions Island domain, Ilo's avatar went to Panchi City and the signal was somewhat unstable. After asking, he realized he had asked a foolish question. Ilo possessed the legendary power, the Starry Sky Scepter. Her power could extend continually under the radiance of starlight. Lu indicated his responsibility to guard the territory and did not plan to accompany them. In the end, among the division general class powerhouses, Mu Yuan decided to take only Duo Lai and 17. 17 was in charge of managing and commanding the 200 human race elite soldiers accompanying them when he was busy. Read the latest on Empire. The next day, in Tianyuan City, within the northern military camp of the Guard Army, an elite legion of 200 troops was arrayed and ready. Standing at the very front were about 20 muscular brutes with bronze skin and towering builds like iron towers. They carried 3-meter-long black dragon-patterned heavy swords on their backs, and their bodies were covered in pitch-black heavy armor. There were 2 protrusions on the shoulder blades of the armor, resembling 2 black spikes jutting out. Behind the giant dragon swordsman was the dragon force swordsman, whose appearance and attire were not much different. Further behind were 150 troops composed of the Imperial Guard series, Archer series, and Nun series. Dressed in black but not as fierce-looking, the fearless war-handsome and fearless general formed a U-shape as they arrayed themselves on the outer perimeter. In the inner circle were the rarer arrow of Polar Star, constellation leaders, and a total of 10 High Order, Epic Nun Brigade members. This was actually a complete troop in itself. The Dragon Force swordsmen and Giant Dragon swordsmen were the vanguard, charged with the task of assaulting and dispersing the enemy. The Imperial Guard series elites were protectors, providing enough space for the arrow of Polar Star to deliver their output. The nuns were responsible for purification, healing, and enhancing the troops' endurance. The archers and nuns were also clad in black standard battle gear, ensuring the uniform color of the troop. The archers wore light armor and hung a short sword at their waists. Explore more stories with Empire. The nuns' attire differed from their usual gentle and dignified nun robes, with a much shorter cut at the bottom of their robes, replaced by slim-fitting black combat pants to aid in more agile movement on the battlefield. They wore a golden pendant on their chests and a leather pouch at their waists, carrying various potions and tools, and a black and gold long-handled warhammer hung alongside. Able to heal and to fight. This was the Tianyuan City nun. In fact, this attire was also modeled after the combat priest's standard equipment. Lord Shepherd surveyed the well-equipped and spirited troops and nodded slightly. Of course, he knew that these equipments were for show more than anything else. All of these were enhanced ordinary-level equipments, which, aside from being made of decent materials and not so easily damaged, had almost no amplification of the elite's combat power. There was no helping it. If it were to craft 200 pieces of rare-level standard equipments, there wouldn't be enough time. Besides, with rare level equipments, uniformity in style would be particularly difficult. Due to the variety of rare materials, the equipments produced would inevitably have some differences in form. The standard issue of the Tianyuan city's main troop was far from being uniform in style. Everyone used whatever they could get their hands on. The excellence equipment numbers in his Tianyuan territory were limited and far from enough to outfit the main troop. He could hardly afford to pick and choose. Even this batch of elites prepared for the demonstration carried their usual armor within their storage tools, ready at any moment to transform into Tianyuan city's main battle elite and tear their enemies to pieces. This time, we will unveil the face of our Tianyuan city before the entire Taishan, before the entire world. Do you have the confidence? Yes. The shout was ear-splitting, with the thick bloodthirsty aura soaring with the roar, breaking through the skies. This was the Tianyuan city elite forged from battles of blood and gore. Even the most gentle nuns had participated in numerous defenses of their territory, facing and even personally shattering countless monsters' skulls. Then, follow me. Yuan did not want to include them in the Lord's Seal. Such an elite unit should break through monsters' countless barriers and appear before the world in the most fearless and invincible form. Duo Lai, carrying a small backpack, and 17, who was dressed just as she was any other day, stood at his sides. A nun from Ilo approached from afar. In her hands, she held a hardcover ancient book, wore round-framed glasses, and had her long hair tied up, presenting a scholarly and intelligent image. I'm ready as well, she said. Then she added, let me give you a lift. The real Ilo followed. 6 starlight magic spheres began to spin behind her, forming a circle array. She reached out and grabbed, transforming the starlight in her hand into a scepter. With the point of Ilo's scepter, a massive starry sky gate took shape amid surging starlight. The gate swung open wide. On the other side was a land of elemental fury, with small tides emerging from time to time. The land of seals. The territory's protection is in your hands. I will drop by for surprise inspections occasionally, she remarked. Yuan glanced at Lu, Deadbone, and others who had come to see them off, nodded slightly, and stepped through the starry sky gate. Duo Lai, 17, Ilo in disguise, and the elite members followed suit one by one. The starry sky gate closed quickly. In the blink of an eye, they had arrived at the southernmost edge of 10 Directions Island domain. Once past the barrier before them, they would step into the Twilight Dominion, and not too far from Taishan's Shilling City. Let's go. The energy surged towards them. With a stern glance from Duo Lai, the violent, active, and restless elemental particles all around them calmed down. This place had already been cleansed, and the group passed through with ease. Upon entering the Twilight Dominion and leaving the perilous land behind, the monsters of the wilderness came snarling and baring their teeth, drawn by the scent. After all, they numbered over 200, and their strong scent made them quite conspicuous to the monsters. But Tianyuan City was no longer a green hand. No order from Yuan was needed. Form ranks, crush them. A giant dragon swordsman spoke up. His name was Deng Long, the strongest among the giant dragon swordsmen and also one of the leaders of the guard corps. Deng Long drew his heavy sword with one hand and swept it in front of him, unleashing a powerful sword light that rolled forth, crushing and tearing apart the onrushing monsters. Aim at the distant monsters, fire at will. Another junior officer spoke. This was the arrow of Polar Star Wang Jian, the rising talent in the arrow of Polar Star following Zhou Yi. The wild monsters, drawn by the scent, were quickly slaughtered by the elites. Even the giant dragon swordsmen who were charging into battle, didn't seem to have much blood on them. The Tianyuan Corps moved southward. Yuan didn't take out the mechanical dragon flights or any other vehicles, he traveled with the warriors. Stay updated through Empire. During the day, they blazed a trail through brambles and underbrush. They killed monsters they encountered, cut through mountains in their way, and redirected rivers that blocked their path. At night, they would light up a bonfire, and Duo Lai would bring out the portable tents, which the warriors quickly set up. Yuan then arranged simple concealment arrays inside the camp. Day after day, they continued moving forward. We'll soon reach Shilling Town. Or is it now Shilling City? Duo Lai was excited. Shilling Town was the official town that Yuan was most familiar with, and he never expected that on his return to Shilling City, it would be after such a long time. After getting to Shilling City, we can take Taishan transport to the capital, right? Ilo asked, are we going directly to Xiandu? No, said Yuan. He had already planned his strategy. On the way to the capital, we will pass by a famous secret realm called Nirvana's Secret Realm, where, legends say, a legendary life resides. Since we've traveled this far, it's worth checking out. But even if I didn't mention it, you would have suggested taking a detour to the Nirvana's Secret Realm, he said, looking at Yi someone. Ilo averted her gaze and looked up at the sky. At this time, in Chilling City, as an official territory designated by the Alliance, with establishments from all major organizations, the hustle and bustle of Chilling City need not be mentioned. During non-red fog disaster moon periods, Chilling City would have even more traveling professionals, as it served as a hub for those venturing into the wilds. Those truly aspiring to improve themselves preferred to struggle in outer regions like Chilling City, rather than stay in the crowded central territories of the Alliance, which were teeming with more people than monsters. However, recently, professionals, lords, and others returning from the wilderness and taking the steel train to Panchi City were increasing in number. The return trips were becoming hard to secure. These are all people preparing to go to the capital to watch the military parade and celebration. Didn't they say that there would be a live broadcast across the entire alliance, ensuring that anyone in Taishan could see it? But a broadcast is just a broadcast, it's different from being there in person. Darn it, I want to go too, but the ticket prices are just too high. I'm different, I don't want to go, it's such a waste of time. It's better to take this chance to pick up some rare assignments at the association. Once we level up to elite, won't we have opportunities to go to the capital? That's what they said, but people couldn't help but glance at the station longingly every time they passed by. The whistle of the steel train as it left the station was particularly alluring. On the spacious street, a lord led 100 elite warriors towards the station. It's the Raging Blade Lord and his Blade Warriors. I heard that the Raging Blade Lord is heading to Lake Haven City to compete for a spot as a Lord representative. With Uncle Raging Blade's skills, the spot is practically guaranteed. There were people familiar with Raging Blade discussing it, feeling proud by association. Suddenly, the street quieted down, the silence spreading like a virus, leaving only the sound of synchronized but not necessarily fierce battle boots hitting the ground. Thud. 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 An impressive young man clad in black armor strode along like a dragon, followed by 200 elite warriors in formation. The warriors had completely concealed their auras, and their progress wasn't dramatic, yet bystanders couldn't help but hold their breath as though they were observing a force of 100 battles veterans who had torn through hordes of monsters and were marching towards them. Only when this force of 100 battles veterans entered the train station and vanished from sight did people begin to catch their breath and chatter anxiously. The lively buzz of conversation gradually returned, but the scenes they had just witnessed were seared into their minds like iron, like fire. They couldn't help but wonder. Who was this figure preparing to compete for a representative spot? So many big shots around. Chapter 455. Famous Sites of Taishan, Nirvana's Secret Realm. Experience Tales at Empire. The steel train whooshed across the vast expanse of land, with rolling mountains and lush forests flashing by the observation windows. The sky was clear, with not a wisp of red mist to be seen, and in the distance, a few birds, or small flying monsters were swooping down toward the steel train. The staccato of machine gun fire sounded like a symphony, periodically bursting close by. This was only Mu Yuan's second time on the steel train, but he felt much more relaxed compared to his last trip, finding even the snarling, claw-waving monsters that wanted to pounce from afar almost cute in his eyes. After all, I am a legendary realm now. Even if the train were suddenly ambushed by a premeditated attack from monster powers, even if this high-speed train completely derailed, flipped over, and broke apart, he would still survive unscathed and have the strength to save most of the people around him. Riding the train was, of course, a lot more comfortable now. There were numerous lords on the train, like Mu Yuan, each accompanied by their troops. Some lords would choose to store their troops in the mark space, but many others bought train tickets for their elite forces. This was based on one kind of rumor. Providing a life closer to that of normal humans could enable their elite to sprout intelligence earlier and more likely awaken consciousness. This rumor was probably not false. Mu Yuan knew very well that warriors with self-awareness did not like entering mark space. Though they didn't put up much resistance to it, either. On the way from Chilling City to Panchi City, the tapping of machine gun fire almost never truly stopped. Compared to the Heartland, the environment in the perimeter territories of the Alliance was just so harsh. The steel train was not absolutely safe either. The train rarely ended up in complete ruin with fatalities, but there were frequent occurrences of casualties resulting from stealth attacks by powerful monsters. Once the train was impacted by a large group of powerful monsters, the lords and profession personnel on board had the obligation to assist in defense. For the Blue Star people during peaceful times, this danger was enough to make one shudder, and they would not ride such an insecure mode of transport unless absolutely necessary. But for old profession explorers who had been adventuring for years, it was quite ordinary. In Eternal World, the greatest danger was mediocrity. Not once did the alarm sound on the train until it reached the north station of Panshi City. Yuan led his elites off the train, making a beeline for the transfer to Tian City. Only in Tian City was there a special train for cross-realm travel. At this north station of Panshi City, there were plenty of lords with troops following them, and some rare, high-order troops with distinctive features were also occasionally visible. Pointy ears, green hair, those are nature elves. Giants. A full 20 giants. Inside this troop, are there actually over 100 Thunderbolt warriors? Passing travelers discussed among themselves. Yuan's troop also drew the frequent gazes of many people. They couldn't recognize what kind of elite troops these were, but they were undoubtedly rare to start with, especially the black-armored warriors who stood 3 meters tall like iron towers. Ilo, who was traveling with them, quickly completed the transfer procedures. They had booked an entire carriage for themselves. This train seems much fancier, et. Duo Lai observed the interior and exterior of the train. The train from Shilling City was almost just a metal box, with steel plates welded over the windows, leaving only bullet holes in a few observation windows. There was no point in talking about comfort in the carriage interior. Many seats were damaged, and dry bloodstains and a lingering stench of blood could be seen in many areas. The train from Panshi City, on the other hand, had neatly arranged leather seats, and the carriage was clean and tidy, a stark contrast to the train they had just been on. However, it doesn't mean this train is fancier. Yuan said, aware of the reasons behind this. The two types of trains serve different purposes. The steel train running between Shilling City and Panshi City is constrained by environmental factors, where priority is given to the train's defense and combat capabilities, with everything focused on practicality. That steel train could even navigate the wilderness during the early stages of the Red Fog disaster moon. From Panshi City to Tian's great city, that route has been opened and cultivated by countless lords over many years. The danger is far lower than in the Alliance's peripheral regions. When trains no longer need to withstand the shock of monster tides again and again, naturally, comfort becomes a priority. Oh! Duo Lai blinked, not sure if it had understood. Yuan wasn't just speaking for Duo Lai, but also for the elites present. These elites possessed self-awareness but were almost blank slates in terms of experience and information they had absorbed. This time, since he was leading a group of elites to the capital for the military parade, Yuan intended to educate them consciously. It wasn't long before the steel train whooshed out of Panshi City. As expected. Initially, while still within the territory of Panshi City, the train encountered several monster attacks, but as it traveled further into the heartland of Tai Xian's Twilight Dominion, the assaults on the train became less frequent, and the machine gun's rattle shifted from tata-tata-tata to tata-ta-tata. It went from rapid to gradual. Yuan looked through the spotless glass windows at the outside world. The mountains, trees, sky, and rivers were similar to before, except there were far fewer monster carcasses in the view. Occasionally, they could even see some small towns and city territories in the distance. Curling smoke, towering buildings. The traces of human civilization grew increasingly prevalent. What's that? Duo Lai pointed towards the distance. A few hundred meters away from the train tracks, several figures could be seen. They were dressed in old armor or leather gear, seemingly holding no weapons in their hands, but dragging a large woven sack behind them. What are they doing there? Duo Lai asked, then turned to look at the all-knowing lord. The all-knowing Mr. Mu fell into thought. This question, he was pondering it too. They didn't look like adventurers. They're scavengers, Ilo explained, adjusting her decorative scholarly glasses. This is the area the train passes through, and as it does, it inevitably kills some of the monsters that attack. Thus, bits and pieces of monster carcasses are scattered on the ground. Some practitioners who dare not fight monsters will choose to pick up monster corpses near the railway tracks, collecting soul sand released from the monsters, remnant souls, and even harvesting materials from rare monsters. There's quite a number of these scavengers, and they form a large group of professionals, aside from mainstream adventurers, explorers, and travelers. I've heard that some scavengers have even formed guilds to compete for some scavenging treasured spots. Duo Lai suddenly realized. Mu Yuan reflected. Indeed, it's only when you step out into the world that you witness all its facets, like the scavenger community, a product that was bound to emerge in this era. Beyond scavengers, there may be many era-specific products that are hard to see from his perspective, his point of view. But on second thought, Ilo is quite the shut-in herself. How does she know so much? Irene told me, I'm not really an encyclopedia. She said. Although, she had glanced over information related to scavengers when learning about Taishan and collecting various data. Dear passengers, please note that the train will soon arrive at Tian City's Zihu station. Passengers who plan to disembark should take their personal belongings and accompanying troops and exit in an orderly fashion. Dear passengers, please note. Mu Yuan awoke from his meditative cultivation. Looking out the window, the steel train was slowly entering Tian City, passing through the enchantment like a water curtain, creating ripples in its wake. On the platform, one could see powerful individuals everywhere, well-ordered troops. In the distance, tall buildings rose like swords piercing the sky. A river hung high in the air, flowing through the city. This was Tian City, the Taishan Alliance's main city within the Twilight Dominion. We have a long way to go to make Tianyuan City as grand and magnificent as this place. Mu Yuan sighed. Ilo was equally astonished. The capital of the Eagle Kingdom where I used to live seems almost like a small rural town compared to this. Just the thought of Tianyuan City becoming as grand and majestic as this place is thrilling. She gazed into the distance. In such a majestic city, one felt as insignificant as an ant, and legends were scarcely any greater. But in Ilo's eyes, there was no sense of inferiority, only a blazing fighting spirit. Her work was directly related to how grand Tianyuan City could become. She was so great. In fact, Tian City's current state is not only the result of decades of development but also thanks to the relentless efforts of Taishan. Such treatment is reserved for an official's core city. Discover more content at Empire. Normally, even if a lord were to spend 10 times longer building and managing their city, it would be hard to achieve half the grandeur of this place. Compared to Tian City, Hanyu City is also like a small rural town. But both Mu Yuan and Ilo had confidence. One day, Tianyuan City will become a city of the world, living up to the name Tianyuan. Traveling from Tian City to Xiandu in the Taishan Great Domain requires transferring to another train and even changing stations. There is only one train station in the whole of Tian City that has trains going to the Taishan territory. The cross-domain train. Not only is the ticket price much higher than that of the steel train, but there are also certain conditions for the purchasers. This naturally poses no problem for the lord of Tianyuan territory. The lords traveling to the military parade could even have their ticket expenses reimbursed. Tianyuan City has its own fixed base in Tian City, which was set up by the entourage that came with Irene and stayed in Tian City. They had all necessary procedures for buying tickets and boarding the train ready well in advance. Is this the cross-domain station? At first glance, it didn't look much different from the previous steel train station, except that the entire row of trains appeared more futuristic, with sleek lines and soft light patterns flashing across them. Mu Yuan boarded the train once again. He also personally experienced the difficulty of traveling long distances in the eternal world. This was still under the circumstance of the Taishan Alliance having a convenient rail network. The train set off again. For the first half of the day, the train still sped across the vast wilderness, passing villages and small towns. It continued until it reached the edge of the wilderness. Dear passengers, please note that the train will now perform space travel. Please remain seated and fasten your seat belts. Do not move around unnecessarily. At the edge of the wilderness, a silver station stood. The railway line winding up to this point suddenly sloped upwards. Like a roller coaster, the train surged up the incline, and at the end, the tracks came to an abrupt halt. The train shot off the rails, trembling and shaking. The earth rapidly shrank away in the field of vision. Mu Yuan saw the end of the land, the end of the great domain, which also abruptly stopped at the station, as if there was an endless abyss beyond. But as the train continued to forge ahead, traversing the silent and empty world, Mu Yuan gradually saw some isles appear. Isles suspended above the dark silence, upon which mountains and rivers could be seen. Some rivers came to an end and simply ceased to flow. These isles, varied in size, seemed like fragments that had broken off from a continental plate. It's like shattered pieces. Duo Lai suddenly said. Mu Yuan felt this description seemed reasonable. Could the world have been shattered and sunk to form the great domains that exist now? If so, what kind of terrifying existence could shatter a world? The train shuttled through the silent world. The shadows of monsters were faintly visible on the aisles. After flying for about half an hour, the train finally began to descend. Taishan Great Domain, they had arrived. This was the core domain of the Taishan Alliance, and although some areas were also suffering from monster invasions, without a doubt, this was the safest and most prosperous place in the entire alliance. The dream of countless professionals was to settle in the great cities of the Taishan Great Domain. And here, there were far more than 3 such official core cities. Just as in the Twilight Dominion, Mu Yuan needed to transfer trains continuously here. It's so troublesome, so troublesome. But the trip back will be much more relaxed. He could have Ilo open the Starry Sky Gate. The distance was greater, but Ilo should be able to manage it. He just had to believe that it was possible. Wait, in that case, could he perhaps send Ilo's avatar ahead with the symbol of legendary power? Never mind, the journey is an experience in itself. Without walking the path myself, how could I witness these magnificent landscapes? He turned his gaze towards his domain. Everything in the domain was functioning normally. 2 days later, the train arrived at an official great city, Nirvana City. They disembarked there for a short stay. Here we are, inside Nirvana City is one of Taishan's famous attractions, the Nirvana Secret Realm. This was a public secret realm. Rumors told of a legendary guardian living in seclusion within it. Most beings of the legendary realm were aware of this rumor, but their number was confined to legends and a very few beneath that status. Most professionals and lords had no idea that here resided a mysterious, noble, and great legend. Even great lords dared not hope to, and often could not, catch a glimpse of this legend. However, leaving aside the trace of the legend, this place remained a famous secret realm, and many traveled great distances in hopes of finding an opportunity within the Nirvana secret realm. Mu Yuan rented a foothold outside the city where the elites could stay temporarily. Then, accompanied by Duo Lai, Ilo, and 3 division generals, he arrived at the entrance to the Nirvana secret realm. He showed his Lord of Taishan credentials and bought a ticket, then passed through the barrier light screen and stepped inside. And so he entered the interior of the secret realm. Town. The town in the Nirvana secret realm was not small, bustling with people coming and going. High-order professionals and lords with a couple of division generals were everywhere to be seen. Noises of loud discussions entered the ears. Damn! The number of people entering the Nirvana secret realm seems to have increased these days. Exactly, I heard the numbers have at least tripled compared to the usual. Hiss, why so many? It's the parade and ceremony. Now many powerful lords from other domains have come over, preparing to head to Xiandu, and since they've come, they will definitely try their luck at such a famous place of opportunity like the Nirvana secret realm. Damn it! Doesn't that mean our chances of gaining opportunities are even lower? The Nirvana Tower only bestows opportunities a few times within a certain period. Opportunity. Upon hearing this word, Duo Lai's antennae like tuft of hair on its forehead perked up. It looked towards the omnipotent Lord. Mu Yuan was a person who had done his homework. This Nirvana Tower is one of the great trial sites of Taishan, extremely magical, with the trial rules of surviving through disaster, rebirth from Nirvana. Trialists who enter the Nirvana Tower and withstand disasters, the longer they resist, the more benefits they can obtain. Even, there is a possibility to receive the special opportunity bestowed by the High Tower Spirit. Even legendary realm powerhouses will venture into the Nirvana Tower, seeking to gain benefits from it. However, Mu Yuan was here, not thirsting for the trial benefits of the Nirvana Tower. Continue your saga on Empire. The trials of the Nirvana Tower, although still precious and rare to ordinary legendary beings, were commonplace to him and them. Not completely useless, but not enough to keep him deeply engrossed. Mu Yuan had truly come here to observe. Take a look at the legend. He was not expecting to encounter the elusive legendary life like a divine dragon. He was not like the other legends, who frantically pursued legendary beings. He was just. In the spiritual link, he said to Duo Lai and Ilo, the Nirvana Tower possesses special rules, and these special rules may have been constructed by this mysterious legendary life. Observing the Nirvana Tower might bring some benefits for you in mastering legendary power. This was the point. Deadbone, Duo Lai, and Ilo were legends, but they were still in their youthful, immature stages as legends. Legendary power was far more than what was simply described on the surface. True legends had long lives, perhaps living for hundreds, thousands of years, or even longer. Their utilization of legendary forces was unimaginable to Duo Lai and Ilo. Even Dead Bone's application of legendary power was merely scratching the surface. No matter how perceptive it was, it needed time. Besides, which legend could not perceive? The group came to the foot of the Nirvana Tower. The tower was only tens of meters tall, predominantly red and blue in color, and at first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary high tower constructed of wood. Yuan stared at it. The elements floating between heaven and earth, the wood of the high tower, the array patterns on the surface, the surrounding forces. They were all stripped away one by one from his eyes. Then what? He wasn't sure what to do next. Suddenly, a somewhat familiar voice rang out. Yuan, are you here too? A rather ordinary-looking young man accompanied by a colossal strengthening figure, almost like a small hill, strode forward. Chapter 456. We have already seen the legend. Yuan looked in the direction of the voice. Lord of Yushan. Yushan was one of the 6 rising star lords who had gone with him to the Dragon Court to represent Taishan in battle. He was also a renowned lord among the younger generation of the Taishan alliance. During the struggle in Dragon Court, Lord of Yushan was almost the second most powerful great lord, just after him. After all, the Lord of Raoshan from his epic generals was too strong. During the selection battles, formidable opponents like Duo Lai and Ilo didn't even compare to the Lord of Raoshan. But now, Yuan could see at a glance that this epic soldier had not yet broken through to the legendary realm. A bit slow, isn't it? No, it couldn't be called slow. Yuan reflected for a moment and felt that he shouldn't use himself as a benchmark, even if, during the Dragon Court competition, the level of the Lord of Raoshan was far higher than Dead Bone and Duo Lai. However, your Lord of Raoshan has achieved harmony in spirit and the fire in his body is incredibly vigorous. It won't be long before he steps into the legendary realm, right? Yes. The Lord of Yushan said, this morning at the Tower of Nirvana, Raoshan fortuitously awakened his domain and is expected to break through within a week. After all, the Lord of the Flesh isn't just any fourth order limit, his combat power is invincible, his body fearsome, and he is one of the top contenders in the Dragon Gate ranking. Once his 3 attributes are complete, stepping into the legendary realm will also not require too much preparation. The great city of Nirvana also has fully equipped breakthrough sites for rent. The Lord of Yushan was confident about breaking through within a week, but the words he used were very humble, always using fortuitously, expected, and not bad to describe himself. This was a stark contrast from his confident and proud demeanor back in the day, when he was like a son of destiny. The Lord of Yushan had indeed changed. Back then, the opportune recruitment of the invincible general, the Lord of Raoshan, catapulted him from an excellent lord of his time to the supreme position among his peers. He was wild, he was proud, but he had the capital to be so. He believed he was the protagonist favored by the heavens and the earth. That was until later, when he realized Lord Yuan had 3 unmatched epic generals and understood that there are always others stronger in the world, and he was not the only one favored. Even so, the Lord of Yushan remained confident and proud. To him, he was just short of Yuan's level, but it wasn't impossible that he could surpass Yuan in the future. But as his strength grew, so did his experience and exposure, dulling that sharp edge that was once like a sword. He suddenly realized that having an epic general really didn't mean much. Powerful lords all had some opportunities to recruit epic soldiers. Even Lord of Ba Long managed to recruit an epic at Dragon Court. In the eyes of those standing atop the world, epics are hardly noteworthy. Epic is really just the beginning. I am fortunate, but far from having the capital to be arrogant. Even epics may be bottlenecked before the legendary realm, and in the entire Taishan alliance, there are countless legendary warriors. Not just him, but the Lord of Raoshan became humble as well. After all, the Great War Zone held too many powerful beings, and the Lord of Raoshan realized he couldn't use past experience to judge Taishan. If he dared to be arrogant, he would be taught a lesson in humility in minutes. Even the undead general serving under Lord Yuan, who once made him tremble and even cultivated a sliver of fealty, would likely be just an ordinary member in the Great War Zone. The Lord of Raoshan looked around but did not see that figure. However, Lord Yuan, along with the female archer carrying a war bow by his side, were strong, above himself. The Lord of Yushan looked towards Yuan and the blue-haired girl. He did not find the Shadow Lord of Tianyuan's legendary realm, but he guessed that both the blue-haired girl and Tianyuan were of the legendary realm. Enjoy more content from Empire. The blue-haired girl was the earliest famed strong figure of Tianyuan territory, and she was most likely an epic. Tianyuan, you're planning to train in the Tower of Nirvana, right? I won't hold you up any longer. Training opportunities in the tower are rare, and the longer you stay inside, the greater the benefit. I believe with your abilities, you will definitely reap a great harvest. After bidding farewell to the Lord of Yushan, Mu Yuan turned his gaze back to the Tower of Nirvana. He could tell that the tower was one with heaven and earth, but aside from that, he discovered nothing else. Despite that, he had a vague understanding of the concept of vision. But the Tower of Nirvana didn't manifest the concept as clearly. Did you see anything? 17 remained silent. Ilo spread her hands. After all, I'm just an avatar, the satellite hasn't been launched, the true essence would be a different story. The satellite here referred to Ilo's starry sky scepter's star, which was not a physical object but a conceptual entity. At the moment, it was carried by the avatar Yi, acting as a signal booster. But since it hadn't truly been hung in the star vault, the avatar Yi was indeed only able to exert the power of an avatar. Duo Lai looked at him with clear eyes. Well, it wasn't going to be that simple. Mu Yuan then purchased a ticket to enter the Tower of Nirvana. As the Lord of Yushan had said, the Tower of Nirvana is a very high-end opportunity site within Taishan, and the cost to enter was certainly not cheap. Ordinary lords and professionals could only earn a chance to enter by spending a large number of contribution points, which was one way to do so. Yet even if they were willing to pay such a substantial number of contribution points, ordinary lords would still need to queue and vie for a slot to enter the Tower of Nirvana. There were several more common training grounds and opportunity sites within the secret realm, available to ordinary lords and professionals. But it was different for frontier lords. A one-star frontier lord had one free opportunity to enter the Tower of Nirvana and could bring up to 2 followers, with priority entry rights. This was indeed a privilege, but one that had been fought for. Mu Yuan was more than a mere frontier lord of 1 star. He quickly completed the procedures and brought Duo Lai and the other 2 in with him. Stepping into the high tower was like passing through the gate of the secret realm. The gate separated the inside from the outside, forming an independent world. Mu Yuan seemed thoughtful. He was observing. The environment inside the tower was quite ordinary, with only an empty space paved with green stone slabs. The space led upwards, winding upwards at the end. The entire Nirvana Tower was a spiral tower ascending upward, with nothing inside. There were only practitioners who had entered one after another. 2 figures were visible a few hundred meters away. They struggled to take one step after another, their foreheads already covered in sweat. Looks difficult. Indeed, I do feel a bit uncomfortable. Duo Lai said. At this moment, an invisible force descended, alighting upon their bodies and spirits. It was as if they were being smelted. Is this the power of the Nirvana Tower? Mu Yuan walked forward step by step. He was not walking fast, for his goal was to observe. Even so, he passed by 2 professional explorers who looked like father and son. He passed by a lord who was lying on the ground. He passed by a young girl with a look of terror on her face. The longer he walked, the fiercer the smelting fire became. Some special abilities indeed have the effect of refining the body, but the power inside the Nirvana Tower is closer to the heaven and earth rules, like the epic training building Ice and Fire Double Heaven. The power of miracle buildings is based on the heaven and earth rules. The higher the grade of the miracle building, the more power it holds that defies common sense and, naturally, the more heaven and earth rules and miracle powers it contains. The power of the Nirvana Tower appeared clearer to him than that of the miracle buildings. Even so, it was still mysterious and inscrutable, like reading a heavenly book. He couldn't even count how many concepts were flowing around him. Too many. At this time, 17, who was focused on honing herself, had already reached a higher place. She came to a spot where Lu Mei started to furrow, and she sat down there. Her eyes shimmered with starlight, as if tracing the trajectory of arrow light. At a certain moment, a notification sounded in Mu Yuan's ear. Notice, your soldier 17 has made a minor breakthrough during the trial, mental power enhanced to solidifying level. If the light of the spirit were to manifest outwardly, then at this moment, 17's light of the spirit would have at least surged upward by a third, and the entire beam of light had become more solid and dazzling. However, 17 achieved a breakthrough while Lord Shepherd himself did not. He always felt that these so-called tribulations in nirvana were of no use to him, the smelting was in vain. He couldn't make heads or tails of the tower's analysis. But since 17 had made a breakthrough, the trip was not in vain. He inquired with the other two. Ilo, as smart as she was, could not discern the trick, not to mention asking Duo Lai. Maybe it's too early to come. Tai Xian also has legendary figures in the lore realm, who can glimpse concepts, they must have observed the Nirvana Tower too. It's very likely that they too have learned but not understood. Wait until later, when Deadbone steps into the lore realm, and then bring it to observe again. Enjoy new stories from Empire. As for the trial and the smelting of the body, Ilo's arrival was just an avatar, which could not be honed at all. And Duo Lai. Mu Yuan looked at Duo Lai, who was staring intently at the walls and the floor with clear eyes. It was evident that it was trying hard to observe something, but its eyelids were already drooping. However, come to think of it, could Duo Lai still be sleepy in Nirvana Tower? Wasn't there an invisible force smelting the body and spirit inside the tower? Like the burning of a flame, the pricking of needles. He could endure it, and he believed Duo Lai could endure it too, but how could you still sleep with such discomfort continuously assailing you? Hey! Duo Lai looked perplexed. What smelting? What refining and smelting? Suddenly, Duo Lai's eyes widened. Notice, your hero Duo Lai has enhanced its devouring ability after consuming concepts. Notice, your hero Duo Lai has acquired a trace of the Nirvana concept. Several kilometers away. Nirvana Town. This secret realm's central hub saw a significant flow of visitors and had already developed a rich tourism and hospitality industry. In a tavern on the second floor, by the window, the blue-haired woman held a chicken claw in one hand and upended a jug of wine with the other, guzzling heartily, uncaring that the drink soaked her clothes. Burp, human booze sure has taste. Burp. Her hand holding the wine jar suddenly paused, and after several seconds of deep thought. My tower, right, why has my tower's strength diminished? The operation of the Nirvana Tower indeed consumed her power, but usually, she would only need to recharge it every few months. If she had to recharge it daily, she'd go mad, she still needed to drink. But now, the Nirvana Tower was like it had a leak. 95%, 93%, 91%, 89%. She had just recharged it. Urgent, urgent, very urgent. The green-haired female completely set down the wine jar, her gaze turning profound as she looked towards the distant Nirvana Tower. She quickly found the culprit. A girl who looked rather silly but whose eyes were exceptionally clear. The intangible force that descended from within the Nirvana Tower to hone challenges and bring about tribulations had no effect when it landed on the girl, instead, it inexplicably disappeared. Disappeared. Gone. What was this situation? The green-haired female stared for a long time but was unable to discern any clues, for most of the power of the Nirvana Tower came from heaven and earth, and she was merely following those rules. She could only see that the human girl had indeed done nothing, yet the intangible tribulation had mysteriously vanished. 83%, 81%, 79%, Grandma's legs. What kind of lineage does this girl have? She thought hard and finally made a decision. Congratulations, you have cleared the Nirvana Tower. When Mu Yuan came to his senses, he had already appeared outside the tower. Duo Lai, Ilo, and 17 were there as well. He had read the guides and knew that when a practitioner could no longer hold on, they would be sent out by the tower's power. But he was clearly standing strong. What was this about clearing the tower? You have obtained the proof of passing, the Nirvana feather. A feather, radiating a blue light, floated down, landing in the palm of his hand. Nirvana feather, epic, a one-time use item that can boost potential or heal injuries, including foundational ones, and it also represents the recognition of the owner of the Nirvana Tower. This epic item was a one-time use item and not as valuable as a true epic treasure. However, its meaning was significant. Mu Yuan suddenly understood a bit, and he looked at Duo Lai, cough cough, it seems we've been shown out. The Nirvana Tower was entered by a certain Miss Duo. Duo Lai had innocent eyes. It didn't understand what had happened either. Mu Yuan, on the other hand, had some idea. It was probably the voracious great force. Duo Lai itself symbolized devouring. It was constantly devouring and absorbing, it didn't even need to practice its domain for it to naturally expand. And this time, the Nirvana Tower's tribulations couldn't break through Duo Lai's passive devouring defense and were directly absorbed instead. And such absorption might have even gone through its strength, touching the core. Thinking this, he felt a bit embarrassed. No, they had cleared the tower fair and square. At most, it meant that the Nirvana Tower had a bug that needed fixing. This tower wasn't quite up to par. Mu Yuan glanced at the high tower a few times, then turned and walked towards the town. The town was thriving, with an abundance of food and drink. Since they were here, Mu Yuan let Duo Lai wander around, buying things everywhere. He found it somewhat strange. This place seems less like a town for cultivation and more like a foodie's haven. The majority of the shops in the entire town were related to eating and drinking, with most of them being taverns or restaurants. Mu Yuan even saw many special local delicacies here. Duo Lai had a blast eating. It's not just me going around eating everywhere. Perhaps cultivation and gourmet food were a good match. Mu Yuan thought so. He also saw a green-haired woman who was hungover, staggering along but holding on to her wine jar as if her life depended on it. Thus, swaying back and forth, she passed by Mu Yuan and his group. Mu Yuan even took a second look. About half a day later, fed up and quenched, Duo Lai packed a vast variety of delicacies to take back for everyone. They stepped through the secret realm's gate and returned to the outside world. Ilo felt it was a pity. It's a shame we didn't get to meet the legend of the Nirvana secret realm. Could he/she be at the very top of the Nirvana Tower? She wanted to see how these naturally born legends differed from them. No. Mu Yuan spoke up, actually, we've already met this mysterious legend, just a short while ago, on the street. Chapter 457. Powerful lords from various places. When Mu Yuan caught sight of the woman with green hair, who was drunk from the night before, he had a strong intuition. This was a legend. It was a difficult feeling to describe and was not based on any familiarity with legendary lives. In his territory, there were only 3 legends, so he couldn't claim to be well acquainted with them. Besides, legends were extremely mysterious, and if one did not wish to be exposed, even another legend would not be able to recognize them. Duo Lai did not realize at all that the green-haired woman was a legend. At most, it had a vague intuition that she was a very strong being. Mu Yuan was different, his intuition was not vague or wavering, he was absolutely certain. To him, the green-haired woman shone as brilliantly as the moon shining over fireflies. It was the aura of a legend. He could also discern which of the strong individuals around him possessed an epic rank, but it required more careful distinction. Mu Yuan roughly understood why he had such intuition. Ilo began to recall the scene just now, contemplating, so this person is a legend, it seems she used some kind of metamorphosis, an imitation technique, but it's not as perfect as Duo Lai's. Duo Lai proudly raised its head. Ilo indeed remembered that person, because, after all, there weren't many in Mystic Town who drank themselves to stupor, just this one. She had given that person a few more glances. These glances were enough for her to retrieve the memory, and with Hong Yi's assistance, perhaps she could use an illusion to recreate the previous scene. This was of no small use to her study of the legends. This task was up to her. A day later, Mu Yuan led a group of soldiers who were preparing for the military parade and arrived at the very heart of the Tai-Xian alliance. Xiandu. From afar, they could see a tower that stood tall like the pillar of heaven, with its 9 colors reaching towards the sky. The gentle radiance at the top of the high tower spread out, covering hundreds to thousands of miles around it. At this time, Xiandu was crowded with many lords, professional strong beings, tourists, and foreign envoys from across Tai-Xian. It was extremely lively, but also a mix of the good and the bad. However, one of the 3 major organizations within Tai-Xian, the Tai-Xian Lianji, had made arrangements in Xiandu and all the other important cities and transportation hubs of Tai-Xian long before the start of the festivities. Xiandu was lax on the outside but strict on the inside, with various secret lookouts and patrolmen, and Mu Yuan had noticed quite a few of them, not to mention there were surely others that he hadn't detected. After a thorough yet uncomplicated verification process, Mu Yuan led his people into Xiandu. A staff member of Tai-Xian Lianji led the way to a training field in the western suburbs of Xiandu. This is the temporary residence provided by the Alliance for you all. It contains 300 sets of dormitories along with basic cultivation and training facilities. There are also detection and defense arrays installed within the residence that can be activated at any time. Later, please have some representatives from Lord Tianyuan join me to collect daily necessities. If you need anything or have any questions during this period, you can consult us at any time, they said. There was still a week left before the military parade. Mu Yuan thought he had arrived early. He had come from far away and had been afraid of delays due to unforeseen events on the road, so he had set out a bit earlier. But he found that he was actually late. More than half of the temporary residences around him had already been occupied by lords and their armies that had come to Xiandu to participate in the parade. Mu Yuan visited his neighbor. It turned out to be a lord he was acquainted with. A great lord. He couldn't help feeling that the circle of lords was really not that big, especially among the high-order lords. Lord of Amber City. A young man who looked about his age with a hint of youthful naivety. But Mu Yuan knew all too well that the Lord of Amber City was a few years older than him, a senior of the same age as the Lord of Hanyu City. He just looked youthful. Continue your adventure at Empire. Lord Tianyuan, please have a seat, Amber said. It's been over half a year since we last parted. On that day, it was only after General Duolai erupted that we were able to kill that powerful aggregated monster of the Snake Man. General Duolai, long time no see. He turned to Duolai. Even as someone in the legendary realm, he was deeply impressed by Duolai's outburst that day. The general's burst of power was so strong, it was almost beyond that of a four-order being. Later, this General Duolai indeed made it into the top 10 of the Dragon Gate ranking, spreading his name throughout Taixuan. It was not just this general, many strong beings cultivated by Lord Tianyuan had made it onto the ranking. He came from a common background. Tianyuan was the same. And because of this, Lord of Amber City was keenly aware of just how difficult it was for Tianyuan to achieve what he had today. Lord of Amber praised him so much, Mu Yuan felt a bit embarrassed. Although, indeed, he, Mr. Mu, had achieved his current status purely through his own diligence and effort. Of course, there was also the contribution of each division general, like Deadbone, Duolai, Ilo, Lu, and others. After sitting for a while, Mu Yuan stood up to take his leave. He planned to take a stroll around Xiandu, and Lord of Amber City also had his own matters to attend to. Amber was not only a participating lord in the military parade but also a high-ranking official of the Taixuan Lianji. He was certainly going to be busy. Just as he returned to his residence, Mu Yuan received a message from Zhang Loxing. Before leaving his territory, he had arranged to meet up with Zhang and Lu Miamu in Xiandu and brought their contact artifacts with him. From inside the treasure bead, Zhang Loxing's voice came through. Yuan Zhu, where have you arrived? I'm already in Xiandu, and I've been selected and awarded the spot for a representative lord in the military parade, not letting down the face of our 121st batch. Zhang Loxing's progress was actually very fast, and if compared with the previous periods, he could have been first in all of them. It was just unfortunate that he was born in the 121st period. Mu Yuan was still happy for him. Congratulations, remember to treat us, and if you don't mind, I'll bring the entire regiment over to celebrate with you. Zhang Loxing originally wanted to say no problem, but when he heard the second half of the sentence, he choked on his words. He couldn't afford it, he just couldn't. He was no longer the second-generation Lord Zhang someone, but a poor little city lord who owed a huge debt. Being a lord was not easy. He coughed and said, Yuan Zhu, there have been lord gatherings happening in Xiandu these days, with either representatives or powerful lords coming and going. Are you coming? The location of the gathering he mentioned was in the west suburbs. But the gathering? It's not some kind of banquet, is it? Although eating and drinking were activities Duolai would enjoy, he might not be able to eat and drink peacefully at a banquet. How could it be? Zhang Loxing said, although there indeed are gatherings for networking and pulling strings, I've heard of one or two, but this one isn't, it's more like a loose assembly. Initially, this assembly was just a place for the representatives of lords to come together to exchange and trade items. Given that we lords come from all corners of the world and there are quite a few of us, it's much easier to exchange treasures than to find buyers and sellers in public secret realms. Later, the assembly expanded continuously, with everyone exchanging materials and sharing cultivation experiences, which was quite a nice thing. Mu Yuan nodded in agreement. It was true indeed. After all, such a gathering of many powerful lords was an opportunity that came once in 1,000 years. After settling down his elite forces and obtaining supplies for the next few days, Mu Yuan took Ilo, Duolai, 17, as well as the two young generals Deng Long and Wang Jian, to the gathering place. The gathering place was an outdoor martial arts field with tents, tables, and chairs set up on one side, and simple drinks and fruits available. Far away, at the end of the martial arts field, a large billboard was scrolling with information. Lord of Ba Long desires to purchase Red Dragon remains, Contact Lord of Ba Long at C Zone number 22, price negotiable. Lord of the Wooden Fish City sells Excellence 3-star Remnant Soul Mountain Giant and Black Dragon Iron Guard, interested parties message privately. Lord Linglong seeks to purchase Strength System Excellence 3-star level troops. Lord Wuji invites swordsmen to spar and fight. White Shark Lord. Mu Yuan glanced at it and realized many of the lords listed were those he knew. As Lord Xiaodeng, whose establishment had only been a little over a year, his network couldn't be considered wide. He could only once again lament how small the circle of lords was. It seems we too could take this opportunity to exchange for some treasures we need and trade or sell off some high-value items we can't use. Read chapters at Empire. His Tianyuan territory had obtained many spoils of war. And the elf secret realm of the Lord of Hanyu City was after all not large enough, it had been drained by him long ago, making it hard for him to find suitable buyers. He looked at Ilo. Ilo understood and said, "I'll have my main body tally everything up immediately." That meant Lord Shepherd didn't have to worry himself. At the gathering place, lords were grouped in 3s and 5s, much like in previous festivals. Mu Yuan quickly found Zhang Loxing and Lu Miamu. By Lu Miamu's side, there were 3 awakened division generals. One of them was dressed in a deep blue dress, yet upon closer inspection, it could be seen that her dress and body were both sculpted from condensed water. A spring spirit system powerhouse, at the 4th order leader level. And moreover, this is actually an epic one. Mu Yuan was certain. Lu Miamu, at such a young age, already possessed an epic general, leaving countless older lords behind. But that's how it is, everyone has their own fortune, an epic is nothing unusual. Zhang Loxing brought even more people, seemingly a whole team. Most of them were not of military kind but were professionals and clerks he had recruited, who were continuously compiling information from the large billboard. They were very busy. Many lords came with several logistic clerks, and only a few, like him, arrived with just a few division generals, which clearly showed their lack of experience. But no matter, with Ilo by his side, he had enough. Lu Miamu was a lord without experience or manpower, she simply sprawled out on the table like a salted fish. Decay.jpg. In the distance, a burly figure approached. Tianyuan, you really came. It was the Lord of Ba Long and Lord Wuji. Lord of Ba Long said, my Xian dragon descendant has already stepped into the legendary realm. I, too, will soon break through, and the molten steel dragon of my territory. It won't be long before my Ba Long territory will have 3 legends. How's that? Not too slow, right? As for Brother Wuji, he doesn't have any outstanding powerhouses under him, but Brother Wuji himself is formidable. It took him merely 2 to 3 months to step into the legendary realm, and he already has achievements like slaying 3 legendary realm creatures. I can't compare to that. Not far away, Zhang Loxing drew in a breath of cold air. They were all young, and of course, he knew both the Lord of Ba Long and Lord Wuji, he even had their contact details. But he truly hadn't anticipated that the Lord of Ba Long had become so strong, on the verge of boasting 3 legends in his domain. And Lord Wuji had an impressive record, having already slain 3 legendary creatures. Zhang Loxing suddenly felt that he couldn't possibly be ranked among the last few of the representing lords. Lord of Ba Long spoke without any sign of smugness. After all, he was quite aware that Tianyuan was no weaker than himself. Tianyuan even possessed a legendary powerhouse who had broken through the ranks, being in the top 10 of the Dragon Gate ranking. This was already more formidable than Brother Wuji. However, compared to many of the bigwigs present, we are still just juniors who need to keep striving. As Lord of Ba Long spoke, he gestured with his chin towards a distant figure. See that dude wearing slippers over there? Zhang Loxing asked, who is that? He looked like a very ordinary older brother. There were plenty of ordinary people present. The entourage of lords, locals from Xiandu who had mixed in, after all, this wasn't some sort of private gathering. Mu Yuan said, he is a legendary figure. Lord of Ba Long looked at him in surprise, correct, this unassuming old guy is the Lord of Yongmian. He is a legendary powerhouse himself, and he has 7 legends under him, known as the 7 divine generals of Yongmian, who are quite famous in our Taishan as well. A lord with 8 legends in his domain. Zhang Loxing said, I have indeed heard of the feats of the 7 divine generals of Yongmian. Lord of Ba Long continued, now look at that one, the boss of the Beijing group. His domain boasts 6 legends, and the entire Beijing group can muster up to 16 legendary figures. That means the boss Beijing can summon more than a dozen legends at once. Lord of Ba Long then successively introduced several other individuals. Lord Yuan, the founder of the Yuan Escort Bureau whose business even extends outside of Taishan, has 7 legendary powerhouses under his command, and they all have illustrious records. Lord Longxi, he has 4 great dragon generals and 5 great heavenly snake generals, making him a truly deserved lord of 10 legends. White Shark Lord, the boss of the White Shark group, you must have heard of him to some extent. Just within his direct lineage, there are more than a dozen legendary figures, and the entire White Shark group has numerous more. Upon saying this, Lord of Ba Long also appeared somewhat wistful. I once thought that the legendary realm was the biggest barrier lying before us, formidable as a chasm difficult to cross. But only after crossing it did I realize that it was just the beginning. The world is vast, and Taishan alone is home to a multitude of legendary figures, not to mention the immensity of the entire eternal world. I think we can only face ourselves with a humble but not self-depreciating heart, and steadily chase after those ahead of us. They were far from strong enough. But they were still young. Mu Yuan nodded slightly. Yes, compared to the vastness of the world, we are but tiny climbers. Besides, isn't the most important thing for survival in the eternal world to understand ourselves? So, even though he had already trained over a dozen legendary generals, even though he already possessed 3 legends, even though he had already slain over 100 legendary creatures, he still clearly recognized, I am just a feeble lord, after all. Chapter 458. Mu Yuan's Combat System. The gathering place, on the stage of martial display. 2 figures collided with a boom, and a series of cracking sounds like firecrackers rang out in an instant before they swiftly separated to either side. The hefty man on the left knelt on the ground, clutching his trembling arm, fully convinced as he said, indeed, as a division general of the Tian Yuan family, I wholeheartedly admit defeat. He stood up and walked away. The iron tower-like hefty man remained standing on the martial stage, his skin under the sun gleaming with a bronze luster. Another win, this Tian Yuan division general named Deng Long is quite formidable. Isn't that the truth? Even the generals sent by Lord Longxi have lost. Although, this was merely a simple sparring, and the participants were not truly fighting for their lives. Although, the generals sent by Lord Longxi were also just second-tier leaders. But the division general of Lord Tian Yuan was also not one of his mainstay generals. This one wasn't even a listed general on the Dragon Gate ranking from Tian Yuan territory. Yet this Tian Yuan general could very well qualify for the Dragon Gate ranking, in my opinion. With a genuine fight, who knows, he might be on the list in a few days. Many present were representatives prepared to participate in the military parade ceremony, and to them, a Dragon Gate ranking powerhouse was nothing special. There were many Dragon Gate ranking powerhouses among those present. They too had powerhouses who had made it onto the Dragon Gate ranking in their ranks. However, the series of Dragon Gate ranking powerhouses cultivated by Lord Tian Yuan were one after another. Continue reading at Empire. This was indeed worth envying. Constructing an elite legion only required money, but cultivating a fierce general was far more challenging. An army soul corps led by an ordinary general versus one led by an unrivaled fierce general is like heaven and earth apart. Reportedly, the main generals of the Tian Yuan family could even take up positions in the Great War Zone on their own, which truly made others jealous. After all, not every legendary realm powerhouse under their command possessed the ability to lead troops or make significant decisions. Martial power is important. But the wisdom to wield that martial power is indispensable. After several matches, Deng Long cited excessive consumption and withdrew. Wang Jian from the Arrow of Polar Star took his turn to spar as well. The atmosphere at the martial display was conducive to sparring, discussion, and exchange. Of course, one could also meet professionals or ordinary lords who presented themselves, hoping to gain connections with the big shots. Sparring among the legendary realm was not held here, after all, this was just a martial grounds, unable to sustain even a fraction of a legendary realm's aftershocks. Those in the legendary realm seeking battle would have to go to Xiandu and use the dedicated miracle buildings. Lord Wuji said, would like to spar sometime. There was the sharpness of a sword in his eyes. Lord of Ba Long originally wanted to echo with an I feel the same to show he was still part of this inner circle, but quickly remembered he was still a mere fourth-order limit weakling. The burly Lord of Ba Long went off to sulk in a corner. The martial display was indeed a great lord's assembly. That day, Mu Yuan, through ILO, figured out what he needed to trade and purchase. What we're actually lacking the most right now are breakthrough materials for the legendary realm, and some of the treasures the lords are willing to part with can serve as substitutes for legendary breakthrough materials. We also lack the blueprints for a permanent excellence rank city wall, but I estimate that such a treasure would be difficult to trade for at this assembly, and we would struggle to produce an item of equal value, said ILO. After all, blueprints of the permanent excellence rank were worth as much, if not more than, some epic treasures. He did possess epic treasures but was naturally reluctant to trade them. He chose to leave it to fate. Upon nightfall, Yuan and ILO arrived at a secluded hill over 200 kilometers away from Xiandu. I'll begin now, said ILO. She placed her pale palm over her heaving chest, and the next moment, her entire hand seemed to penetrate it as though stabbing through her torso. Amidst the shimmering bluish glow, her hand slowly withdrew, holding an object wrapped in dazzling light, its form unclear. This was an extension and a symbol of the Starry Sky Scepter's great force. However, this object existed only as a manifestation or an outward appearance of conceptual power. It existed merely as a conceptual entity. Even if this symbol were to be destroyed and shattered to pieces, its power would remain undiminished in the slightest. Moreover, ordinary non-targeted conceptual power would struggle even to damage this symbol. ILO held the starlight in her hand. The light swiftly rose, silently hovering in the sky, becoming an inconspicuous star in the night sky. Twinkling steadily. ILO's satellite had officially launched, and from then on, she could extend her power through the satellite whenever and wherever she wished. The might of the Starry Sky Scepter had been displayed, and standing here was just one of ILO's avatars, no different from her true self being present. However, once the satellite was launched, it could not be moved easily, at least not carried around as a signal relay like before. Launching the satellite was just the beginning. ILO's ancient book fluttered rapidly through its pages, and an invisible force spread out, enveloping the desolate hill. Starlight began to gather, slowly taking the shape of a gigantic light gate. But the formation speed of the Starry Sky Gate was slow, far slower than her previous spells. Perhaps the distance between the Taishan Great Domain and the Dusk Domain, or the 10 Directions Island Domain, was simply too great. The Taishan Domain and Dusk Domain were not neighboring each other, they had traveled on shuttle trains flying over the vast expanse of nothingness. Seasons change under the heavens, all returning to the starry sky. ILO chanted softly. Her chant seemed like the will of heaven and earth, as the invisible great force changed the night sky. The sky was still the sky, but it was no longer the previous sky, it was ILO's starry sky. She had taken control of this region. Starlight fell, and ILO bathed in the starlight, her body's energy boundless. Behind her, there was a piece of the starry sky. Time trickled away. ILO output several times, dozens of times, even tens of times the energy reserve she possessed. Finally, she managed to erect the entire starry sky gate. She did not break out in a sweat, for her energy was inexhaustible, and her body was still full. But it was indeed quite cumbersome. ILO was like a small pipe connected to the ocean. Although the ocean was vast, her output was too small. If she could be like Duolai and make the fierce sun plummet to the earth in the snap of a finger, she wouldn't have been so busy for so long. She said, "The starry sky gate is now open. You can have some treasures sent over or have a dozen or so more people come through, but not too many. Too many, and she would not be able to maintain it." It was a burden. The burden depended on the number of people and how long the starry sky gate remained open. Yuan understood. Taishan actually had a teleportation array. In major war zones like Hang Mountain and Longshan Pass, the core fortresses were equipped with teleportation arrays that could instantly travel between the Great War Zones and the heartland of Taishan. However, such arrays were rarely used, as it was clear they were expensive to operate. The cost of using ILO's Starry Sky Gate was practically negligible. However, if one were to convert the appearance fee of a legendary life, it might be much more expensive than the cost of activating the teleportation array. Time passed. The military parade ceremony had not yet begun, and Yuan was far from idle. On the drill ground at the edge of the city, the Tianyuan Corps deployed in formation, with 17 taking command of the troops and marching forward. Yuan stood by, watching. "Lord, your battle gown has been completed." In the morning, the Corps practiced maneuvers at the drill ground. In the afternoon, there were fittings for battle gowns and trial rides on war horses. Moreover, he needed to interact with the other parade lords to maintain a relative tacit cooperation between the corps. From time to time, he attended the assembly of lords to blow off steam, collecting intelligence and trading treasures. Sometimes, he couldn't avoid participating in social balls. "This is killing me, when will the parade start?" At the gathering, Ba Long was already drenched in sweat. After all, he was a newly risen lord of Xin and was favored. Being favored was good, but too much attention was somewhat unbearable. He couldn't just snub them with a scowl. There were even lords who coveted his body, hoping to introduce their daughters, nieces, sisters, or granddaughters to him. Humph! Women would only hinder my pursuit of dragons. But to refuse them one by one, I have to be somewhat graceful. It's truly a matter of life and death. Ba Long wiped his sweat. Yuan stroked his chin. Strange. Why wasn't anyone trying to sell him their sister? Was he not handsome enough? He compared himself to Ba Long and was certain that he was streets ahead in looks. Surely, I am just too handsome, too outstanding, so the girls feel ashamed. He vaguely remembered that there were indeed some offers. But apart from a few he was well acquainted with or some powerful lords he couldn't refuse, he left all other diplomacy to Ilo. Clearly, the capable Ilo handled everything very well. Otherwise, like Ba Long and Wuji, he would have been soaked with sweat by now. Aside from rehearsal, assembly, and social events, Lord Shepherd, of course, did not forget he was a lord. And this was the eternal world, where might makes right. Xiandu. In one of the epic training grounds, Yuan had booked one of the high-level arenas. The area was enveloped in a mist of vivid colors, the thick spiritual energy so concentrated it was visible to the naked eye. Deadbone, Duolai, and Ilo's legendary power. I've used the Lord's power privilege but can hardly borrow any strength now. This was partly because his Lord's power was only a meager LV5, but more so because the legendary power was too top tier. After all, Lord's power was just one of the abilities controlled by the Miracle Lord. Lords, upon stepping into the legendary realm, often start researching to form their own unique battle systems rather than just using Lord's power to fight. Of course, even more start focusing on personal combat method research when they see no hope of breaking through to the legendary level. The simplest ways to enhance personal combat power include two methods. One is to use the Heritage Stone to gain the power of a certain troop class, the second is to develop and enhance one's own talent abilities. Most lords naturally possess both. However, Yuan had always refrained from using the Heritage Stone for himself. In the early days, he didn't want to use a low-grade Heritage Stone to restrain himself, thereby affecting his future. And now, he felt that using the Heritage Stone was almost useless for him. Even if he could find an extremely precious epic-level Heritage Stone, then what? At most, he could awaken an epic ability with it, but his progress would stop there. He was not lacking in epic abilities. And he himself could not evolve any further. Through the Lord's power, he had already solidified Supreme Devouring and Reaping what you sow as his two super talents. He was left with one more slot to solidify. The development of combat methods must still focus on personal talents. I don't readily enter the battlefield myself, I'm surrounded by unparalleled generals, but that does not mean I can lack combat power. It's okay not to fight, but not okay to be incapable of fighting. Even lords who are not adept at fighting do not lack much in their own combat power. To be too weak is to become the enemy's constant target. A fatal vulnerability. And he, Lord Shepherd, has only one life's talent. It's supportive. Spiritual Link is a purely supportive talent that can't even bring a bit of enhancement to himself. He styled himself the human-shaped light web, a human-formed communication base. I, after all, am just a lord who specializes in support, excelling in long-range support and micro-control. Yuan murmured to himself. With a flick of his fingers, streaks of starlight shot out, transforming into several figures identical to him. This was his starlight avatar. His hand's skin bulged, and strands of white jade skeleton broke through the exterior, assembling themselves into extraordinary skeletons upon the ground. This was skeletal creation. Behind him, the image of Wraith Sacred Mountain appeared. This was merely an outdated version of the Holy Mountain, as Lord's power could not pilfer a legendary level Wraith Sacred Mountain. Nevertheless, from within the mountain emerged bone dragons, vampires, and dark knights. Their forms were slightly blurred, unable to exist for long, but with combat power comparable to 3rd Order or 4th Order strongmen, that was beyond doubt. In the blink of an eye, Mu Yuan had mustered a miscellaneous corps of exactly 100 soldiers. They were strong, yet also weak. In the legendary realms battles, such a corps would not be particularly effective. Under the coverage of Dead Bone's legendary power, Little Skeleton possessed power enough to injure giant dragons. It could fully exploit the numerical advantage of the undead. Long before stepping into the legendary realm, Dead Bone had understood the principle of amassing the strength of the crowd. Mu Yuan's combat method was different from Dead Bone's. In the world around, an invisible web of spirit spread out, enveloping and linking every single one of the 100 soldiers. In Mu Yuan's eyes, these warriors seemed to have specks of light illuminating upon them. He slowly raised one hand towards the sky. The 100 soldiers also slowly raised their hands towards the sky, following his lead. A small flame kindled at his fingertips. At each soldier's fingertips, a small flame simultaneously appeared as well. Energy surged within him, a mighty tumultuous wave concentrating at the tips of his fingers. In a moment, a thunder dragon over 100 meters long roared as it pierced the heavens. And at that same moment, the arrayed 100 soldiers also launched thunder dragons from their fingertips. A rumbling sound thundered across the azure sky. Thunder dragons danced wildly in the sky, repelling and destroying everything around them. The very air buzzed, elements obliterated, and space cracked with audible snaps. Mu Yuan looked at his fingertip. Indeed, in the end, I'm just a lord adept at support and micro-control. Chapter 459. Tian Yuan elite soldiers bathed in blood and fire. At the crack of dawn, the sky was clear and cloudless. Mu Yuan was preparing at his garrison while I Lo checked his attire. He was dressed in a set of silver and black full-body armor, adorned with strands of gold and red patterns, which lent the armor both nobility and a martial aspect. In his hand, he held a long spear, while a blood-red cloak draped over his armor, descending to his battle boots. He appeared as if enveloped in blood, with the blood seeming to flow around him. Truth be told, this set of ceremonial combat gear provided by the officials was indeed impressive. It was also a set of equipment of the excellence tier, quite valuable, and not just for show. However, you have checked this 3 times already, he said. Today, I Lo was fussing like a mother hen, inspecting even the tassels on the weapons multiple times and using techniques to make the cloak look brighter and prevent it from wrinkling. After all, Lord, you represent the face of our Tian Yuan territory today, and that's something you've said yourself, she reminded. Today, more importantly, you'll appear before all of Taishan, before the entire world, and you wouldn't want to embarrass yourself in front of everyone, would you? That said. No, he had been sidetracked. As their distinguished and promising lord, how could he possibly embarrass himself? Moreover, today's military parade doesn't just feature me as a representative lord, we are merely a supporting role, he noted. Ah, right, turn around, let me check one more time. A supporting actor must also pay attention to his appearance, she insisted. Your Highness, in this Taishan military parade ceremony, there are a total of 108 representative lords, most of whom are young. Among them, several are noteworthy, including the Lord Tian Yuan, reported an official in the inner city area of Xiandu, within a mansion of the Yongxing Empire. The ambassador was reporting collected intelligence to his own prince. The Red Star Prince glanced over the documents. He was a prince of the Yongxing Empire, wielding significant power, ranked among the foremost figures of the empire. As could be inferred from his title. In Yongxing, not any prince could bear the title Star, and his title, Red Star, was derived from the name of the empire's signature military unit, the Red Star Royal Cavalry. Ordinarily, a military parade festival of the Taishan Alliance wouldn't necessitate the presence of someone of his stature. However, Taishan was developing too quickly. Taishan's initial rapid development was supported by the Holy Griffin Empire. They needed emerging forces like Taishan and Shenyao to combat the spread of red mist. The Yongxing Empire, upon its foundation, had also received support from the Holy Griffin Empire. But the Griffin Empire was no philanthropist, they wanted emerging forces to resist the red mist yet not become overly powerful. The Red Star Prince knew a secret. Initially, the Holy Griffin Empire had only supported the Shenyao Empire, a force from Langxing. Later, when Taishan unexpectedly surged to prominence, the Holy Griffin Empire began investing in them, he said. Even so, the investment the Holy Griffin Empire made in the Taishan Alliance was far less than what was spent on Shenyao. This extensive investment was limited to the early stages of these two forces, he continued. Nevertheless, both Shen Yao and Tai Xian had developed astonishingly quickly, each ascending to a status comparable to Yongxing within mere decades. Even though their comprehensiveness and depth were still lacking in comparison, the progress was remarkable. Among them, Tai Xian was particularly astonishing. The initial power of the Tai Xian alliance was far inferior to that of the Shen Yao Empire, but over the years, Tai Xian's comprehensive strength and performance had subtly begun to surpass Shen Yao. The Yongxing Empire had to pay more attention to the Tai Xian alliance. And this time, it was the first large-scale public military parade since the establishment of the Tai Xian alliance. The prince's gaze scanned several familiar names. Han Yu, Liashi, Evening Elephant. Eventually, his eyes settled on the name of one particular representative lord. Tian Yuan. An individual who had come to the Eternal World just a year and a half ago. During the last Dragon Court contest, with Han Yu's mighty personal strength, Tai Xian claimed the greatest benefits. And this Dragon Court contest, another new star, Tian Yuan, has emerged, once again granting Tai Xian extensive benefits, he mused. The Tai Xian alliance's national fortune is certainly thriving, he noted. And in contrast to the city Lord Han Yu, Sword Lord Liashi, and Lord Evening Elephant, among others that were already on their radar, the information they had about Lord Tian Yuan was exceptionally scarce. Scarce indeed. In Tai Xian, Lord Tian Yuan's public combat achievements were also few and far between. In the Dragon Court, Lord Tian Yuan, relying on a few of his division generals, powerfully defeated one opponent after another, the ambassador recounted. And unlike the rapidly rising young powerhouses such as City Lord Han Yu and Sword Lord Liashi, Lord Tian Yuan's own combat power is not formidable, but rather, he has many capable subordinates, he added. Lord Tian Yuan's public combat record was 0. Even in the Dragon Court, it seemed that Lord Tian Yuan himself had not displayed substantial strength. The prince speculated. The ambassador suggested, we suspect Lord Tian Yuan has a talent for nurturing division generals, and perhaps his life's talent lies in this domain. That could explain why he has one after another exceptional division general under his command. No, the prince objected to that hypothesis. It is definitely more than that, the prince asserted. During the conflict at the Dragon Court, Tian Yuan was a very young and inexperienced lord, he didn't have enough time to cultivate numerous strong individuals. He recruited them directly. Tian Yuan's greatest strength is recruitment, attracting untamed powerhouses. At the festival grounds, many heroes were eager to pledge allegiance to Tian Yuan. Not long ago, Tian Yuan even recruited a legendary powerhouse of epic tier in the Shen Luo domain, he concluded. What does this mean? The prince said gravely, it means that Tian Yuan has some kind of terrifying attraction that can even draw epic strong ones to serve under its banner. According to our speculation, there are at least 3 legendary figures among Lord Tian Yuan's subordinates, and the number of epic rank strong ones could be more than 10. Inside the embassy of the Shen Yao Empire, 2 legendary figures exchanged glances, sighing with frustration. Another top-level strong one is about to rise in Tai Xian. And we have missed the best time to kill Lord Tian Yuan. When Lord Tian Yuan was still weak, they could have tried to assassinate him or destroy his territory through sabotage and could then blame the disaster on the monsters. A common territory being destroyed by a monster tide is nothing unusual. Even lords with boundless potential are no different from ordinary old lords or minor lords before they grow strong. But, Tian Yuan territory is no longer just a young sapling, they have several legends in their ranks. They are still insignificant compared to the Shen Yao Empire, yet many of our covered methods are no longer effective. A territory guarded by legendary figures would not be simply wiped out by a monster tide. There are many things we can't and wouldn't dare bring into the open. Look on the bright side, at the very most, it's just a top strong one, a top-level territory. But we must list Lord Tian Yuan as an S-level target for focus. We need to analyze his abilities, talents, legions, and strong ones. This time, taking advantage of the Tai Xian military parade, we'll finally get a chance to see Tian Yuan and his division generals up close. 108 representative lords, indeed they are all powerful lords or rising stars of Tai Xian, but most of them are just supporting roles, it's only a few main characters we need to pay attention to. Will Lord Tian Yuan be at this parade, and is he really as formidable as the rumors suggest with 3 heads and 6 arms? Does Tian Yuan have an office in Xiandu, and are they still hiring? Can I nominate myself? Sister, can you refer me after you join Tian Yuan territory? At 9 in the morning, the celebration officially began. The flags of Tai Xian fluttered in the sky, the resonant military music echoing like the sound of heaven and earth. At the same time, ding! Reminder, the Taishan Alliance celebration has officially started, and the event will be broadcast live in the sky above all Taishan faction miracle territories. Reminder, would you like to join the Taishan celebration live broadcast? Many lords and heroes heard the reminder echo through the air. In the Twilight Dominion, within Panchi City, numerous citizens gathered in front of the professional association, continuously inquiring about the celebration. Wasn't there supposed to be a live broadcast today? Where is it? In a world without smartphones and computers, how do you expect to stream? As the azure sky bloomed with clouds, they suddenly rolled and shifted, and a grand illusion stretched across like a mirage, broadcasting the grand ceremony in Chengdu. In Tian City, Shilling City, Nirvana City. One by one, the live illusion appeared above each city, causing countless people to look up at the sky. The music began to play. Representatives from the pioneer group, Taishan Lianji, and the professional association all took turns to deliver speeches. Among them, the representative from Taishan Lianji was the Lord of Luofu Mountain, a figure standing tall like a mountain, whom Yuan had once met. The hardships of the early days of the Alliance's establishment. The Alliance gradually finding its footing. The Alliance resisting the invasion of the Red Mist, reclaiming land from monsters, and reviving wasteland. Most people in the Taishan Alliance, including the Miracle Lords, didn't experience the early dark chaotic era. But the Lords had experiences with resisting the tides and developing territories, and the common people also went through the chaotic times like the end of Langxing. The Lords moved from initial hardships towards stability. And after surviving the end of Langxing, the common folk also began a relatively peaceful new era of life. All of these shared experiences resonated deeply with the people. It also made them acutely aware that to survive in the eternal world, to live in peace and stability, a military force is essential. Strength is the guarantee. In our Taishan Alliance, it is the lords and countless soldiers, fighting fiercely and spilling their blood, that have jointly built such security. 9 azure divine dragons flew past the 9-color tower in Chengdu, ultimately whistling as they entered the azure sky. Then one after another, the Taishan Alliance's more common and famous high-order troops appeared one by one, galloping past. The music suddenly became somber. People seemed to see blood, fire, and the screams of monsters. The wilderness was a land of bloodshed, where one could always spot the ferocious silhouettes of monsters, assaulting the territories of civilization, bringing destruction and death. But the lords led their armies to construct line after line of defense, resisting the tides and battling against the monsters. The lords' representatives began to make their appearance. The first legion to enter was led by a lord in silver armor, wielding a red tassel spear while riding atop a warhorse. Behind him, a 100-member elite legion followed. Though relatively youthful in vigor, this cavalry unit was precious given that every member was mounted on a battle steed. They charged forward as if surging towards a tide of monsters, fearless and undaunted. Legions entered one by one, symbolizing that Taishan was constantly growing stronger. Mages threw fireballs that streaked across the sky like shooting meteors. Frost spread across the land, intertwining white frost transformed into indestructible war spears. Spring spirits tread upon the waves, rolling past. Lord Wangba in golden armor brandished a sword, casting brilliant light. Is this the young generation of Taishan? The time for the legion's martial display was brief. After passing through the grounds, each legion completed its performance. But the lords were watching too, observing the performances of the other representative lords. Tyrant Dragon Corps, Wuji Corps, Exquisite Corps, one powerful legion after another, in front of the whole Taishan and the entire world, displayed their sharp edge. However, what about Tianyuan? Feather Moon Lord gazed into the distance. She was called Little Tianyuan, but she did not like this nickname. She was herself. Given the same amount of time, she might not lose to Tianyuan. In 1 year, she would have her division generals climbing the Dragon Gate sky list one after another. But you, the young generation's leader, rumored already to match the old generation of lords, how strong are you? Don't disappoint me. She murmured. Suddenly, exclamations sounded from afar. Tianyuan has arrived. Black armor, red cape, spear in hand, and riding a horse. The wind stopped, clouds changed color, and dragons roared. Roar! The low growl of a giant dragon echoed through heaven and earth, twin golden dragons' eyes made the sunlight seem dim. Whoosh! Behind 50 stout men like iron towers, the majestic dragon wings suddenly unfurled, the invisible might of giant dragons sweeping across the sky and earth. In the distance, the many representative lords still within the enchantment of the venue seemed to have their throats constricted for a moment. It's the Dragon Force Swordsman, one of the recruitable troops from the land of Dragon Court. A top-tier, elite soldier class. However, even a Dragon Force Swordsman doesn't usually possess such strong dragon might. This dragon might is almost no less than that of a real giant dragon. The main force of Tianyuan territory is so formidable. In the distance, the weakest Feather Moon Lord turned pale and staggered back 2 steps. She seemed to see golden giant dragons soaring and howling. She also saw stars falling. Golden light interwoven with starlight blue formed the legion's battle attire. She even seemed to witness golden titans trampling over the waves, sweeping across heaven and earth, starlight blue arrows piercing through heaven and earth, bringing down stars. Roaring giant dragons plowing into the wave of monsters, the legion slicing through waves like a knife. That tide of monsters capable of swallowing an entire city was stubbornly held back by the rocks. Soldiers fought desperately, plunging into enemy lines to break strong foes and seize every thread of survival. To survive. To resist. To protect the homeland. Through bloodshed. Through fire. Reborn from flames. This indeed was an army of elite soldiers, not only experienced in the baptism of blood and fire but also imbued with their own convictions. Chapter 460. The Job Seeker, Speculations about Tianyuan. Born from blood, the veteran warriors of Taishan. The official newspaper issued by the professional association featured the veteran warriors in a parade procession on its pages. Dragon men with wings wide open raced across the sky, as if heading toward the blood-fogged monster tide, fearlessly daring. Your next chapter is on Empire. Below them were lords and elite legions, their presence majestic as they marched forward with heads held high. These are our Taishan's elite soldiers. I recognize him, that's Lord Tianyuan. It's said that at only 19 years old, he had already built a city and led legions to crush the monster tide several times. Several times? I heard that Lord Tianyuan has eradicated dozens of monster tribes, and even slayed tens of monsters from the legendary realm that are like god demons themselves, forging his illustrious reputation through such slaughter. Your information is too conservative. I have clearly heard that when Lord Tianyuan arrived in the eternal world, heaven and earth celebrated, and the Dao resonated with sounds of triumph. It's said that in order to assassinate Lord Tianyuan, the monsters sent out millions of troops, including hundreds of god demons from the legendary realm, but all were cut down by Lord Tianyuan. In a certain settled city, a few young men were arguing. Older folks did not join the debate, but their gazes were fixed intently on the figures in the newspaper. Mighty. Valiant. Born from blood. They were all Blue Star people who had once lived in peaceful times. Even though they each randomly acquired a profession upon entering the eternal world, including ordinary 3-star professions, the majority were still at level 1 or 2 of Zero Order. They also lacked the courage to directly face and battle the monsters. The monsters they had seen were terrifying. During the end times on Blue Star and their early days in the eternal world, they had encountered bloodthirsty monsters. With crimson pupils and massive, strong bodies, their sharp, sword-like teeth were filled with blood and festering flesh. They could effortlessly tear apart, gnaw, and crush human bodies. Although they were professionals and possessed a bit of supernatural power, they did not feel capable of confronting the terrible monsters at all. Even the army and patrols within the base cities and satellite towns did not seem to them to be as strong as the monsters. After all, this is the rear, the safe area, while the powerful armies are on the front lines, the officials from the resettlement office told them. They remained anxious. This was the unease that stemmed from witnessing monsters slaughtering and devouring humans, the forced departure from their familiar homes, the experience of world's end, an accumulation of various anxieties. Reassurances, propaganda, and the establishment of cultivation academies had not made a noticeable impact. But a broadcast that enveloped the entire sky of Taishan had an effect. They had a strong military. They were not incapable of fighting against the monsters. No matter if the monsters surged forth like a massive wave, they could still be torn and ripped apart. There were regiments of veteran warriors, bathing in blood and fire, fighting the enemy, defending their homeland. I want to join the army too. I want to slay monsters, I want to. Lord, over the past 2 days, we have already received hundreds of job applications. At that moment, 2 days had passed since the parade celebration. Yuan wasn't staying in Xiandu, but he hadn't returned to his territory through the Starry Sky Gate either. He could inspect the state of his domain at any time even when away from it, not fearing any slip-ups within, but such chances to travel were rare. He was scouting for locations suitable for establishing Tianyuan territory offices. Tianyuan territory now had a sufficient workforce, and after several experiences, Zhou Yi, Sang Hun, Deng Long, Tina, and other young commanders also had the capability to stand on their own and lead an army. Even though Tianyuan territory could not be like the old and established great domains, with their own people everywhere, neither could its reach be limited to just a few places like Shiling City, Panchi City, or the main city of Lake Haven. He had already established his own office in Xiandu a few days earlier and rented a medium-sized station in the suburbs of Xiandu, where he would station a legion permanently. This was to facilitate the work of the offices. Sometimes when local guilds or strongholds needed support, they could call for reinforcements from the Xiandu station. And Xiandu's railway network could reach most cities within the great domain of Taixuan. This time, it was the newly established Tianyuan office that received hundreds of job application letters. Hundreds of letters, is that a lot or a little? The unreliable lord asked. Ilo sighed and said, a lot, very many. Our office has been established for 6 days now, and we didn't receive any job applications in the first few days, but in the 2 days since the parade celebration ended, we've received a full 100. I guess it's now more than that. Moreover, our office is not well known, few people are aware of it, and we have not issued any external recruitment ads. Otherwise, the number of job applications would have far exceeded this amount. As one of the most important strongholds of Tianyuan territory stationed outside, Ilo had an avatar presiding over that place. She could not rest easy leaving it entirely to inexperienced elites to manage. Yuan couldn't either, hence Ilo had to endure the hardship. He noticed Ilo's feigned sigh, but her mood seemed not too bad. So, these hundreds of applicants are of good quality? He asked. Ilo nodded, indeed. Among them there are even third-order warlord-level experts. In Tianyuan territory, third-order warlords were hardly worth mentioning. However, for professionals of common birth to have cultivated to the third-order warlord level was already sufficient to prove they were not ordinary. At the very least, there was a high probability they were extraordinary. Just like the previous Blue Star. The people of Blue Star were adept at judging others based on their education level, but it couldn't be denied that those with higher education indeed tended to have better learning abilities, patience, and willpower. In the eternal world, it was much harder for ordinary people to climb up the ladder step by step. Ilo said, we have set up, or are planning to set up offices in various cities and places. While we have enough military power for security, we are far short of clerical staff to handle affairs. Among these job seekers, quite a few meet our requirements, and can even be considered excellent. Of course, this has a lot to do with the lack of clerical staff in our territory. It was no small feat for elites to awaken self-awareness, acquire basic life knowledge, and learn rudimentary writing and arithmetic. You couldn't expect elites, whose self-awareness hadn't even awakened for 2 years, to learn how to deal with reports, data statistics, and information management. Most of the territory's citizens in the Tianyuan territory couldn't do it either. The territory's citizens were mostly refugees and destitute individuals, the majority of whom were even illiterate, so one couldn't expect too much from them. But it was different with the Taixuan elite job seekers. These were high-quality workers. As the number one worker of Tianyuan, Ilo found this very agreeable. Recruiting a batch of high-quality elites to join, our offices in various places will not be short of staff. We can pair some of the more astute elites with these employees, ensuring a basic level of security, she said. However, our base outside of the territory is still too small, and we can't take 2 big steps in a short time. Otherwise, massively recruiting staff from outside may give potential enemies opportunities to exploit. After all, Lord, what you want most is stability, isn't it? The latest intelligence on the Tianyuan territory has been compiled. Inside the Taixuan realm. At a secret eye of Shenyao base, a high-ranking officer with a golden pupil badge on his uniform was reporting back to headquarters through an encrypted channel. We have also dispatched a few A-grade scouts who have been lurking in Xiandu to submit their resumes to Tianyuan's office in Xiandu. If we manage to get into their workforce, perhaps we will be able to acquire more information about the Tianyuan territory. However, the eye of Shenyao officer shook his head slightly. Even if our scouts manage to get in, it will be difficult to obtain confidential intelligence in the short term. In the offices of Tianyuan in Xiandu, Panchi City, and Tian City, there are elite direct lineages of Lord Tianyuan stationed. Given the performance of the Tianyuan Corps during the military parade, I have to rationally speculate that Lord Tianyuan has many veterans who have awakened their self-awareness under his command. If this were not the case, how could Lord Tianyuan, an independent lord who rose from common folk, have so many loyal hands? His domain would have been infiltrated like a sieve by now. This speculation was contrary to common sense. In the eternal world, there were no shortages of methods to force growth. It was not impossible to train a bunch of fourth-order leaders in 1 or 2 years. However, fourth-order leaders who were forcibly trained this way would not only struggle to seize even a glimmer of legendary opportunity in the future, it also wouldn't be easy for them to awaken self-awareness. Awakening self-awareness was related to rank and level. High-order troops and fourth-order strongmen were bound to awaken self-awareness eventually, but this required a lengthy process which at the very least took several years. It made sense for a few specially trained generals to awaken their awareness in 1 or 2 years. But the awakening of self-awareness in dozens or hundreds of elites wasn't quite logical. However, in the Eternal Continent, common sense often came after chance. This is just my speculation, the Tianyuan Corps might not be as strong as they appear. We need more realistic and authentic intelligence, the officer continued. But I believe that as Lord Tianyuan truly steps onto the world stage, such intelligence will soon be obtained. Then we will be able to determine whether this brightest star of the younger generation of Taixuan is a Jiao dragon, Chu dragon, or a true dragon. In a fragmented island domain, gigantic stone pillars stood on the land, countless scarlet patterns sprawled from the bottom up to the top. Red mist enveloped the area, the azure sky no longer showed daylight, and the living earth was being eroded inch by inch. Below the crystalline pillars, a vanguard officer from Dragon Sleep Valley surveyed the restless shadows and said slowly, "Just wait. Restrain your underlings. The Great Lord has commanded that we wait for all the forces to arrive before we concentrate our power, inflict heavy damage on Taixuan, and devour the lands of Taixuan, turning this land and its creatures into our blood food. Before that happens, we need to wait, be patient. Let all of you remember this." Roaring voices echoed throughout the red mist land. Violence, ominousness, and brutality pervaded every space here. Outside the red mist land, the strands of red mist between heaven and earth were visibly increasing, wafting through the air. The roots of corruption were suddenly forming, taking root, eroding the earth. Monsters were being born from the red mist, gathering in larger numbers and surging outward with roars. In a flash, several days passed. In the Twilight Dominion, outside a small city in the Panstone region. Boom, boom, boom. The ground trembled slightly, and a black line appeared at the horizon, with small black dots emerging in the sky, threatening to obscure the bright sun. On the watchtower, troops not yet possessing sprouting intelligence stood guard mechanically, their gaze moving back and forth along a set path, oblivious to the trembling of the earth. But there were also professionals hired to patrol who, groggy and half-awake in the watch-post beds, caught sight of the little black dots in the sky. The person jolted fully awake, and his drowsiness evaporated in an instant. He scrambled up to a high spot in the watch station, from where he could see the long, rolling black tide coming in the distance. "It's monsters. It's a monster tide." The sentry rang the alarm bell. The piercing, urgent sound of the alarm quickly echoed above the city. This city, located in a remote area but not on the very outer edge of the Taixuan domain, sounded the highest level of alarm for the first time in 10 years. After all, even during the most ferocious period of the Red Moon disaster, they had not faced such a tide. "Call for help! Quick, call for help!" The monster's roars nearly drowned out the sound of the alarm. Yuan had returned to the Twilight Dominion. The 200 veteran warriors who had accompanied him were now reduced to a little over 140. More than 70 elites remained at the Tianyuan outposts established along the way. Before returning from Xiandu, he had called for a dozen more civilian troops from his territory, such as Starlight Scholars, Night Raven servants, and others, to be deployed together. "We have established our own strongholds in 6 cities. Though there are only 6, they already cover all the transport hubs. It will make it much easier for our territory, whether it's gathering information, transmitting messages, or transiting goods." He had personally chosen and established each of these strongholds. To the commanders and deputy commanders stationed there, he left seeds of spirit to ensure they could communicate across domains at any time. An advantage of Tianyuan. Just looking at his communication with other lords using communicative tools, which required one-on-one contact and barely worked over long distances, made it clear how significant this advantage was. If not for the fact that coalescing the seeds of spirit also posed a substantial burden on him, Lord Shepherd, he would have loved to equip every elite with a spirit seed walkie-talkie. The Tai-Shan Alliance's influence in the Twilight Dominion is considerably smaller compared to the Taixuan domain, with only 3 core cities. We already have strongholds in these cities, it's time to head back home. He was just thinking this, when suddenly, he received an emergency message. No, several. From the Panshi City, Shilling City, and Red Maple City strongholds. Panshi City is calling for urgent help. They say the westernmost Red Mountain City has encountered a monster tide, and there's even been a sighting of a legendary monster. Duo Lai, the map. Mu Yuan took out the map of Dusk Domain Tai-Shan Alliance from the everything bag carried by Duo Lai. It showed that Red Mountain City was located at the very western end. This wasn't the outermost boundary of the domain, but it wasn't far from the edge of the Great Domain. However, the edge of the Great Domain is usually empty and fractured, not a place where monster tides typically originate. The defense of Red Mountain City had been going on for half a day. Luckily, a powerful lord happened to be in the nearby area, who stemmed the tide and prevented the city from being instantly overwhelmed. Unfortunately, Red Mountain City was quite distant from the large Panshi City, and there were no strong forces stationed nearby. And facing such a tide, the support of ordinary lords was like a drop in the bucket. Red Mountain City remained in grave danger. Hold on. Reinforcements are on their way and will arrive soon. It's the Tianyuan army led by Lord Tianyuan. Experience exclusive tales on Empire. Chapter 461. Arrival. Red Mountain City, built against a mountain, is a small city with a lineage of a dozen years. A level 5 territory. As a level 5 senior lord, the Lord of Red Mountain is also quite a competent lord. After all, there are a handful of lords who have spent 20 or 30 years developing their territories and still have not passed the promotion trial. Reliant on a red copper mine discovered in earlier years, the Lord of Red Mountain had built a fairly intact domain with complete military and civilian facilities. Even though its location is somewhat remote, Red Mountain City can still be called a flourishing small city. Red Mountain City even has a red city wall more than a dozen meters high, which fully protects the city on the side facing the wilderness. It is for this reason that in the face of the sudden onslaught of monsters, Red Mountain City was able to hold its ground and not be overwhelmed and annihilated in an instant. Even so, the roar of monsters entered the ears, and the rumbling sounds were incessant. Bang! Find adventures on Empire. A flying creature fell from the sky, crashing into the city lord's mansion, smashing several large planters. At this moment, the flying creature still retained strong vitality, flapping wildly, destroying everything around it until it was completely killed by the guards stabbing it repeatedly with their spears. The wind passed, and the stench of blood struck the face. The Lord of Red Mountain hurried to contact reinforcements. The Alliance, officials of Panshi City, surrounding lords, old friends, and the Red Dragon Group to which his Red Mountain City was affiliated. He was a group lord, who climbed to the position of city lord step by step with the investment of the Red Dragon Group. In Red Mountain City, many lands and industries are assets of the Red Dragon Group. Of course, after many years of operation, the Lord of Red Mountain fancied himself as part of the group's senior management with a considerable say in matters. After all, he was a senior lord. Damn it! Reinforcements! I said I need reinforcements. Otherwise, the whole Red Mountain City will fall into ruin, and all assets will be shattered. Don't you understand? The Lord of Red Mountain cursed angrily. Before him, a figure interwoven with light and shadow revealed a bitter smile. Red Mountain, it's not that we don't want to rescue, but the group is willing but powerless. At this time, we can only hope for the officials and other rescuing lords. The Red Dragon Group was a respectable group itself, with several dozens of controlling territories, a large trading company, 4 medium-sized trading companies, and its businesses extended to hundreds of towns and cities, renowned in the entire region of Panshi City. The caravans of the Red Dragon Group could go to any place in Twilight Dominion, and the number of monster tribes and lands of filth that the group had eliminated was beyond count. However, Red Mountain City faced a massive wave of monsters, a tide suspected of harboring creatures from the legendary realm. Compared with a great disaster, the Red Dragon Group could not be called powerful. In the entire group, only the founder-director he was at the legendary realm, plus the group also enshrined 2 independent legendary individuals. The figure said, I have already dispatched 2 division generals to lead troops to your aid, but Director He and the 2 enshrined legends, they are not nearby. In reality, they might be nearby, just not willing to take the risk. Director He was reluctant to risk his group's only legendary realm general, and the group could not command the 2 enshrined individuals. Regarding this, an old friend of the Lord of Red Mountain felt helpless, for he could only send reinforcements within the scope of his authority. There were not many guards left inside the city lord's mansion, as the majority of people able to bear arms had already gone to defend the walls. Mounting a griffin, the Lord of Red Mountain ascended above the city. In the distance, a 2-headed flying dragon hovered, with a towering figure standing on its back. He looked ahead, holding a heavy sword with one hand and slashing forward. The sword light was vast, like ripples on the surface of water growing more and more turbulent. The sword light, absorbing the elements of heaven and earth, swelled from a dozen meters to 100 or 200 in the blink of an eye, and swept across 1,000 meters of sky and earth before falling upon the monster-infested area outside the city walls. Boom! Monstrous creatures turned to dust, creating a gap in the black tide. A giant fissure broke open in the ground, but this gap was quickly refilled. Amid this dark tide, high-order monsters occasionally emerged, easily leaping onto the city walls by stepping on the corpses of other monsters. Red Mountain City's walls, built up a second time, were rare level walls reaching 30 meters high, yet they only stopped the common monsters. The towering strongman rode the 2-headed flying dragon, rushing about to put out fires. The Lord of Red Mountain, too, became a firefighter, focusing on sniping down the powerful boss-level monsters until the assault wave briefly abated. Only then did he come beside the 2-headed flying dragon, looking towards the towering strongman and saying, "President Zhang, we are immensely grateful for your rescue assistance in Red Mountain City, and we will surely present a generous gift afterward." As he spoke, the Lord of Red Mountain also took out several excellence-level restorative items and handed them to the burly man. President Zhang took them and, glancing at one, unscrewed a potion and drank it down. President Zhang, a personage from Beijiang City, would have been recognized by Mu Yuan as the man who, years before, had briefly served as a vice president in Beijiang City. However, President Jiang's term as vice president was very short. When he went to Beijiang City, it was really because the military forces had suffered heavy losses and their only legendary general had died in battle, leading to him being ordered to return to Beijiang City to recover. But he was not given long to convalesce before Langxing entered the end times, and President Zhang hastened to the borderlands to fight back the monsters. He asked, "How many reinforcements?" He also said, "No legendary monsters have shown themselves yet, but this kind of monster tide is likely to spawn legendary monsters. Moreover, even if there are no legendary monsters, I can't hold on forever." There were simply too many monsters, including quite a few that were of the 3rd and 4th order. He, too, had only recently reached the legendary realm, and the attrition could potentially lead to his death. This is very helpless, but it is the truth. The city lord of Red Mountain said, "I have already sent out an emergency aid request. The Lord of Panxi has dispatched 2 legendary realm strongmen, Sword Saint Tianhe and Great Stone Lord. They are on their way here." Zhang Cheng nodded slightly. Both Sword Saint Tianhe and Great Stone Lord were absolute strongmen in the legendary realm, standing at the peak of the heaven and earth realm. Once they arrived, Red Mountain City would be safe. It was also fortunate that the current general environment was stable, and Panxi City had a sufficient number of legendary strongmen on standby, enabling them to send these 2 immediately. However, Zhang Cheng also understood that Panxi City was far from Red Mountain City and it would take considerable time to reach it. Furthermore, the city lord of Red Mountain continued, "The powerful lords who have confirmed they will come to support include Lord Tian Yuan, Lord of Scorching Flames, Oak City Lord, and Lord Giant Elephant. These lords either entered the legendary realm themselves or possessed legendary realm strength, or they had strong armies at hand, with valiant generals and countless elites. The arrival of any one of them could alleviate the current crisis. The lords of the surrounding regions have also expressed their willingness to lead troops to support, but our military strength is limited, with very few strong men of the 3rd order and 4th order. Relying on the strategic advantage of Red Mountain City's terrain, we can play a significant role, killing many monsters. But if we lack this terrain advantage and directly charge into the tide, we might not even kill many monsters before being swallowed by the surging monster tide." Outside Red Mountain City, on an unnamed barren mountain some 10 kilometers away, a few lords paused to look out. They saw in the distance a dense, continuous wave of monsters. The number of monsters was beyond counting, and Red Mountain City was already engulfed by them, not even clearly visible. Only the occasional rising blaze and dazzling sword light proved that Red Mountain City was still resisting, not yet destroyed. Whether out of their identity as neighbors to Lord Taishan or out of duty, they all wanted to support, but indeed they were willing but unable. If they directly charged into the monster tide, it would not be a rescue, it would be no different from suicide. Wait, let's wait a bit longer. If we can gather more, stronger forces, if we can have top strong men leading us, then we might be able to tear through the monster tide and reach the inside of Red Mountain City, said an older lord. Suddenly, one of the lords spotted two small black dots in the distant sky, getting closer and closer. It seems, a strong one has come. When Mu Yuan received the rescue information, he was actually still within the territory of Tian City, incredibly far from Red Mountain City. However, after enlisting his elites into the Lord's Seal, leaving only himself and Duo Lai behind, their speed in traveling the road became as fast as lightning. Duo Lai flew. He was flown by Duo Lai. Even when Duo Lai was not yet a legendary life, it had an extremely high affinity with the wind element, could command storms, and could turn the ever-changing badge into wings of wind, flying at an extremely fast speed, even faster than the wings of the Wind King at the same level. It was at most slower than the wings of the Wind King with the soaring 9 heavens. Now that Duo Lai had become a legendary life, its command over elements of heaven and earth had risen more than a notch. It was no longer the rookie legend of old but a super-tier heaven and earth realm with the domain radius expanded to over 10,000 meters. With just a thought, it could influence the elements of heaven and earth for over a dozen kilometers. It rode the wind, commanded the wind, turning the storm into a vessel that tore through the sky. Mu Yuan at this moment was like a missile, his whole body laid out horizontally in the air, head first, feet trailing, hands slightly outstretched. The raging storm passed by his sides, forming a visible aura around his body. Duo Lai, mastering the authority of heaven and earth, quickly detected a hidden legion in the distance. No, it was several legions, about a few hundred people. Listening to Duo Lai's report, Mu Yuan pondered for a moment, let's go down and see what the situation is. The storm began to slow from its rapid pace. Their bodies shifted from a head-first horizontal position to an upward incline, and when they descended onto the barren mountain, Mu Yuan set foot on the earth. I am part of the reinforcements that have come to support. What exactly is the situation in Red Mountain City? A lord who seemed to be a military leader said, the monster tide appeared suddenly. Red Mountain City was initially able to hold, but soon found that the number of monsters was increasing. These monsters, we do not know where they came from, have gathered and formed a massive tide, and their number seems to be still increasing. Find your next read on Empire. A few of us lords are willing to help, but we do not have the capability to break through the tide. Now, we are not quite clear about the situation in Red Mountain City, he added. At this point, the eyes of this lord suddenly paused. Are you Lord Tian Yuan? The big boss Tian Yuan who surpassed one second-generation lord after another with the body of a commoner. The Tian Yuan giant in the legends, who defeated representatives from various nations only a year after his emergence. The Tian Yuan god with generals as numerous as clouds, elites pouring like rain, and possessing each and every unmatched epic war general. The older lord maintained a more steady demeanor, while the several younger ones could not help exclaiming. This was a big boss. A massive big boss. The older lord said, I am the lord of Bian City, and I'm very grateful to Lord Tian Yuan for coming to our aid from 1,000 miles away. Lord Tian Yuan, Mu Yuan stated his family name solemnly, your courage is even more admirable. He wasn't just being polite. His resolve to come to the rescue from such a distance was due to his self-confidence. With his capability, he naturally shouldered some responsibility. However, most of the lords present were just second-order elites or third-order war generals. They were truly risking their lives by coming here. He might not be able to do the same, but he admired these brave souls. He extended his hand toward the open space in front of him, the Lord's seal on the back of his palm glowing brightly. Giant dragon swordsmen, fearless war commanders, one after another, the elite warriors appeared swiftly. A ring on his finger suddenly scattered into starlight, and the starlight converged not far away, taking the form of Ilo, clad in a star blue robe and wearing round glasses. As soon as the elites arrived, they quickly sprang into action. Some stood guard around, while the arrow of Polar Star warriors took to the high ground for observation, ready to strike at any time. 17 shot an arrow into the sky. The arrow, dragging a tail like starlight, flew into the distance, piercing through the waves and the flying monsters, circling around the vicinity of Red Mountain City. She said, Red Mountain City has sustained some damage but is still holding on. However, more and more monsters are climbing the walls. At this rate, in an hour or two, Red Mountain City may not be able to hold out. Duo Lai said, then what are we waiting for? Let's take action now. Right. Mu Yuan looked at the several lords from Bun City. We're going to tear through the tide and enter Red Mountain City, are you coming with us? Together. However, Mu Yuan stopped Duo Lai from taking action. The tide is right under the walls of Red Mountain City, it's not suitable to use wide-ranging killing moves. Otherwise, the walls might shatter before we can eradicate the tide. Moreover, the appearance of this tide was strange. In ordinary days, it was hard to even see monster camps in the domain of Red Mountain City, let alone such a large-scale monster tide. The reason for the tide's appearance, and where it appeared from, was crucial. Duo Lai, this great general, had to be kept in reserve for now. Deng Long, you take the lead of the army and smash the tide in front of us. Yes. The army was already in battle mode, quickly advancing forward. The armies from the several territories of Bun City followed behind, also entering battle mode, with the lords watching the surroundings with eyes wide open. As they moved forward, they encountered more and more monsters. Soon, group after group of monsters howled as they pounced. At the end of the black tide in the distance, a large group of monsters stopped charging towards Red Mountain City and began sniffing around and biting towards the reinforcements. All forces, charge! Commander Deng Long gave the order. He held the dragon-slaying great sword in both hands, his pace quickening as he ran, with the other 49 giant dragon swordsmen and dragon force swordsmen following on either side of him, forming a shaped arrowhead cutting through the tide. Positioned within the army formation, the arrow of Polar Star soldiers continuously fired triple arrows and six-fold arrows, picking off the flying monsters around them. Monsters fell like rain. The soldiers charged fearlessly. Charge! 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 The Dragon Force swordsmen were like heavy trucks, charging forward with unstoppable momentum, cutting monsters in half or smashing them into pieces as they went. Roar! Suddenly, a Tianyuan powerhouse let out a great roar and transformed into a majestic and massive dragon. The dragon landed on the ground, crushing any blocking monsters to pieces. In the blink of an eye, Red Mountain City was in front of them. Chapter 462. This is General Tianyuan. Mu Yuan stood atop the castle wall of Red Mountain City, surveying the surroundings. The city defenses of Red Mountain City were quite sturdy. Its reddish-brown walls were double the height of Tianyuan cities, wide enough to allow 2 carriages to run side by side, and dotted with numerous watchtowers, arrow towers, and spikes like spears for defense. This Lord of Red Mountain City is also a cautious person. Otherwise, Red Mountain City couldn't have held out till now. This was equivalent to the peak tide during the Red Fog disaster moon, but the defensive structures and garrison strength of Red Mountain City certainly couldn't compare with official core strongholds like Shilling City. Mu Yuan thought the walls of Red Mountain City were exceptionally well built, as their 30-meter height inspired a full sense of security. He had also wanted to make the walls of Tianyuan City taller and more majestic, but after an evaluation, and persuasion, by Ilo, he had to quench that idea. There was no other reason. The wall style provided by the miracle blueprints only allowed for construction of 12 meters in height. If they wanted to build walls as high as 30 meters, like those of Red Mountain City, or even taller, they would have to do so on their own, on top of the miracle blueprints. Walls built in such a manner could also achieve the solidity of rare level walls, seemingly as one entity, but couldn't possess the extremely fast construction speed characteristic of building miracle buildings. Constructing a rare level miracle building could be completed by a group of construction workers in half a day, but if every brick and tile had to be laid by hand, the time required would be much longer. The walls of Red Mountain City were built brick by brick, which must have taken at least a year or 2, or even 3 years. If Tianyuan City were to spend 1 or 2 years building such a wall, it would greatly affect the development of the territory. The city lord of Red Mountain hurried over, and upon seeing the people who had torn through the onslaught to enter the city and the elite warriors spread out atop the city wall, visibly relaxed a great deal. Continue your saga on Empire. He wiped the bloodstains on his hands. Thank you immensely. His gaze swept over each of the lords present, eventually resting on Lord Tianyuan. The other lords were acquaintances from real life, or at least he had met them once or twice. After all, they were all local lords. But Lord Tian Yuan. He couldn't grasp the temperament of this gifted lord and was considering what to say when Lord Tian Yuan spoke up. Lord of Red Mountain City, the situation is urgent. Let our warriors join in the defense. Good. I will make arrangements immediately. Assisting in the defense wasn't just everyone taking up arms and swinging wildly. Some areas of Red Mountain City had tense defense forces, while others were comparatively safe. Some segments of the wall were suitable for warrior-class professionals to guard, and some locations were excellent high ground for artillery, fit for long-range troops. If everyone rushed in a swarm, it might disperse the warriors who were already guarding and fighting, subsequently affecting the already crumbling defense line. Counterproductive. At that moment, only a few powerful individuals took action, killing some high-order monsters that had leaped onto the wall in the nearby areas. The city lord of Red Mountain called over a few aides, explained the situation to the warriors and arranged their defense zones. These aides weren't soldiers but people from Langxing Profound Country, and their relationship with the city lord of Red Mountain was that of an employer and hired workers. In Red Mountain City, or rather, in some larger territories, such hired workers were quite common. The lords needed talent that could assist with administrative tasks, manage the territories, and, during war, provide strategy and command the troops. After all, when facing real high-intensity wars, lords often can't attend to every aspect, and they don't have many subordinates with the capability to manage or command troops. Normal professionals also lacked the ability to command large forces or armies in battle, but as long as they could oversee a section of the wall, fill in gaps, and give commands in case of unexpected situations in battle, that was enough for the lords. Whether it's a group lord or an independent lord, this was the same. The difference being that group lords' powers were restrained, whereas independent lords could hire and fire employees at their discretion. The larger the territory, the more reliable staff was needed. It's not an exaggeration to say that lords who relied solely on their direct lineage to maintain the operation of their territories, without hiring any professionals, were as rare as pandas. An aide took out a map of Red Mountain City, which had red circles drawn on some areas, both large and small. A dozen seconds later. So this is the area most impacted by the onslaught, right? Deng Long asked. The aide affirmed. Deng Long said, "First and second Dragon Force squads, follow me." He then addressed the aide, "Inform the officers there immediately, we're moving out first." "Hey, wait!" The aide was about to say something but saw Deng Long unfurl a massive pair of wings behind him with a whoosh, leap from the city wall, and rapidly ascend into the sky, stirring up the wind and racing towards the most dangerous front line. 19 Tianyuan elites also spread their wings, jumping from the wall and soaring up, quickly forming two columns as they sped off. The aide was stunned for a few seconds before swearing under his breath. "How can I inform them? I can't directly contact the officers on the west city wall, wait for me, hey!" He ran to the edge of the battlement, leaning against the wall losing focus in his gaze. The next second, a shadow loomed over him. The aide looked up. A huge claw descended from the sky, scooping him up like a little chick, then ascended rapidly toward the heavens. The resonant echo lingered between heaven and earth. Continue your adventure with Empire. 17. Be on alert and snipe any monster strong enough to threaten the city walls. Each squadron should be led by their own captain and head to their respective sections of the city wall to stand guard. Mu Yuan studied the map for a moment and said. During a defense battle like this, a group of 3rd and 4th order strongmen could play a role far stronger than a single legendary realm. Provided that the enemy had no one from the legendary realm present. He issued the orders. As a lord like Mu Yuan, issuing orders and then contemplating the current issues was sufficient, but for a staff officer like Ilo, who was responsible for refining simple commands and implementing them into action, there was much more to consider. She had already taken up residence in the command center of Red Mountain City. The command center was a fortress located high up in Red Mountain City, about 700 or 800 meters from the east city wall. The person responsible for liaising with her was a general under the Red Mountain City Lord, a female black knight with tidy short hair. This black knight had a body as robust as a bear's, and when she walked towards one, it was like a small mountain approaching. Standing next to her, Ilo could only reach up to her chest armor. At that time, the black knight had one hand wrapped in a thick bandage, and her breath was somewhat feeble. It was obviously due to this that she had stepped back to a secondary role to handle coordination and liaison work. "I am Xia La, the Defense General of Red Mountain City. Tianyuan City, Ilo. Ilo tiptoed to shake hands with General Xiala. Ilo immediately entered into work mode. Our 1st, 2nd, 6th, 10th, and 13th squads have arrived at their defense areas. We'll now be taking over as main defense, so your people can take this opportunity to rest and assist us. Is that okay? No problem, we will organize logistics teams to transport supplies in a timely manner. Ilo, multitasking, quickly dispatched each squad to their corresponding defense zones and meticulously arranged the defense areas, squad leaders, necessary supplies, support staff, and so on, thoroughly and quickly. She even helped with coordination of the support forces, including those from Lord Bun. The command center, which initially seemed chaotic, suddenly became much more ordered. Xiala watched in amazement. In the latter half, all she managed to say were okay, and no problem, as Ilo took charge of the coordination. The efficiency of her solo coordination was higher than that of the entire command center's 20 or 30 people. Amazing, so impressive. You must be one of the famous generals of Yuan City. Once these arrangements are settled, will you also take action? Ilo shook her head. She was merely a feeble and pitiful incarnation. I'm not one of our Yuan City's warriors, I'm just a civil officer dealing with trivial matters for the Lord. Since Tianyuan and the various support corps joined, the crisis at Red Mountain City had greatly alleviated. West City Wall, 3rd Defense Zone. This was the section most intensely battered by the onslaught, and more than half of the arrow towers and watch towers erected on the city wall had been destroyed, leaving numerous pits along the entire stretch of the wall. Boom! With one punch, Deng Long turned a diving flying monster into pulp. He swiftly turned around and slashed his sword towards the distance, a glorious arc of sword light beheading 2 monsters that had climbed up to the battlement. He then opened his mouth and spit out a light bomb that exploded below the city wall, stirring up a cloud of dust and blood spray. Not far away, the knight responsible for this section of the wall held his longsword, looking around blankly. What was he supposed to do again? Just moments ago, he had been worried about not being able to hold the line, but now, he could hardly see a single monster on the city wall anymore. No wonder we were asked to assist the elites of Yuan City. If it weren't for these elites being too few in number to cover all the defense areas, there probably wouldn't be anything for us to do. Is this the invincible Yuan City's military scene at the parade? They're even stronger than I imagined. So much stronger. Just watching the parade live broadcast, the knight had determined that the Yuan Corps was indeed powerful. However, possibly limited by his poor imagination, he found that he had still underestimated the elites of Yuan. Indeed, about 20 people who had arrived at this section of the wall were the cream of the Yuan Corps. Not only were they powerful in combat, but they also seemed to have wisdom, understanding how to intercept and kill the oncoming monsters without needing his assistance, unlike the Red Mountain City's defenders on the wall. If he didn't watch some of them, they might just disappear during combat, maybe even chasing after monsters and jumping off the wall, never to return. Considering his inconsequential combat abilities and that they didn't need his tactical advice, the knight in command looked around, finding nothing to do even amidst the heat of battle. He felt ashamed. The monsters that had climbed the wall were already killed or repulsed, and one of the Yuan elites unfolded their wings and dove down from the city wall, while 2 others came to the edge with energy building in their hands, ready to cover. They were never just passively defending, often, an offensive is more suitable than exclusively defending. After cutting down a 3rd-order monster, Deng Long leaned on his sword, looking out at the still numerous horde of creatures, and couldn't help muttering to himself. There's a lot of these monsters, and not a few of the high-order ones, but somehow it feels too easy when fighting them. What's going on? The knight looked puzzled. Deng Long didn't continue fighting, instead, he patrolled the city wall, pondering, then suddenly said, I've got it. These high-order monsters. They lacked intelligence. In front of the command center, a massive, majestic 2-headed flying dragon descended. The burly figure descended from the back of the flying dragon. President Zhang! Mu Yuan called out. President Zhang looked over, the figure before him gradually overlapping with the image of the young man from years past. I knew this reinforcement was especially powerful, it turns out it's your soldiers. Zhang Cheng gazed at the young man before him. Find your next read on Empire. Back in his days, whenever he had nothing better to do, he would think about contributing to his hometown and fostering the younger generation. He had also seen that Mu Yuan was a steady and excellent young man with extraordinary potential. But he could never have imagined, the commoner-born Mu Yuan would be able to outmatch countless second-generation players and lords, and even rise at a miraculous speed, leaping to become the most dazzling star amongst the young generation of Taishan. It was quite remarkable. The rescue from Tianyuan today was extremely timely, otherwise, Red Mountain City would likely have been impossible to hold. As for himself, if this tide were a strategy of the monster legends continually depleting his own forces, he might have been in danger too. But for him to abandon Red Mountain City and make a breakthrough escape, he couldn't do it. He would not leave until Red Mountain City fell, beyond the point of no return. Mu Yuan had also not expected, he had encountered a legend a very long time ago. No, at that time, Vice President Zhang Cheng maybe was not yet a legend, but, as a fourth-order strongman holding the position of a vice president in Beijiang City, he was really condescending himself. Mu Yuan suspected there were some reasons for this. He later thought about sending President Zhang some gifts to express his gratitude but couldn't find him, despite inquiring everywhere. He had not expected that they would meet here. He looked towards the two-headed flying dragon. He is the lord referred to among the Jianghu as skilled at using dragon-type troops, and he immediately noticed the extraordinariness of the two-headed flying dragon. Its bloodline is very rich, just one step away from the epic rank, right? Just one step. Talking about his own flying dragon, Zhang Cheng also showed a relieved smile, but this one step might also never be crossed in its lifetime, it's up to fate. Zhang Cheng quickly drank down several recovery potions, then patted the dragon's back. All right, I should go continue my patrol, having you join us at least fills me with much more confidence. Now even if one or two legendary realm monsters are lurking around, we can make sure they come but cannot return. Mu Yuan stopped him. President Zhang had been fighting at the front lines, his energy was not small, far from being replenished with just a few potions. President Zhang, you should rest for a bit, we are here after all. No, we still can't be sure where the legendary realm monsters might launch a stealth attack from, I must stay ready to take action at all times. Old Zhang, you don't trust me, do you? He called over 17, leave the task of guarding against monster stealth attacks to my general here, you should rest first, otherwise, if a real legendary realm monster shows up later, where will you get the strength to fight? But, Red Mountain City wasn't small, it still required constant patrolling to be sufficiently safe. That's what Zhang Cheng wanted to say. Previously, he was firefighting everywhere, which is why he rode the two-headed flying dragon. He needed to conserve the energy he used to harness the power of heaven and earth for flight. But in Zhang Cheng's memory, Mu Yuan was a steady young man, who wouldn't make idle boasts. Sure enough. He looked towards 17, General Tianyuan, not far away. The wind brushed through, her hair fluttering. She held her bow, her eyes closed. She hadn't climbed the city walls, hadn't walked onto a high platform, she just stood there, not seeming poised for battle. The arrows flew. They shot out with a whoosh, one after another, spreading out to pierce the azure sky, and then precisely raining down on targets hundreds or thousands of meters away, hitting the bullseye. Standing here, the entire region of Red Mountain City was her hunting ground. She truly was capable of vigilantly guarding all sides by herself. This was a general of Tianyuan City, wasn't it? Chapter 463. The source of the waves, shattering space. It's precisely because Zhang Cheng is legendary himself that he understands the inconceivable nature of this technique. By controlling the power of heaven and earth, he could vaguely perceive the situation in Red Mountain City. But this perception was not sharp enough. Even if he could perceive it, if a legendary monster were to appear, he would still be too late to act. He would have to harness the power of heaven and earth to fly over, then draw his sword, slash, and strike. By the end of this process, a legendary monster could have destroyed an entire wall, resulting in countless deaths and injuries. The reason he had been able to ride the two-headed flying dragon to extinguish fires everywhere was because, even if a fourth-order boss leapt onto the walls, the army of Red Mountain City would be able to resist for a while. If the army of Red Mountain City were nothing but a rabble, he, being a legend, still couldn't defend it for long. Compared to Zhang Cheng, who had a clear idea of what was happening, the city lord of Red Mountain City, General Xiala of Red Mountain, who had come to the command post, was somewhat dumbfounded as she watched arrows shoot into the azure sky. What does this mean? Red Mountain General Xiala switched to the hero viewpoint, overlooking the city wall defenses, and suddenly exclaimed, "Dead!" In just a moment, 6 high-order monsters died. That was just what she saw, not including the ones she didn't see. She saw these seemingly inconspicuous arrows, which actually didn't possess great destructive power, pierce the monster's crimson eyeballs with precision, penetrating from behind their heads and spurting out trumpet-shaped fresh blood. The monsters struggled a few times, then their bodies crashed to the ground with a thud. If one could precisely hit a monster's eyeball, then even an elite-level warrior could potentially kill a high-order monster with a single blow. But this if was from the beginning an impossible premise. With precise targeting, 17 from Tianyuan can quickly and efficiently kill one high-order monster after another with low expenditure of resources. Perhaps, any monster weaker than her could be swiftly eliminated. Judged the Lord of Red Mountain City. This truly is a rookie slayer. To this general from Tianyuan, he himself was just another rookie that could be taken down with a single arrow. He envied her, but he could not attain her skill. At this moment, he genuinely breathed a sigh of relief. With help from the Tianyuan reinforcements, and such a powerful general from Tianyuan on scene, my Red Mountain City will likely have no problems getting through this disaster. It's stable. Hundreds of miles away from Red Mountain City, in a barren wilderness. The ground collapsed, creating a crater with a diameter of 1,000 kilometers. Deep and seemingly leading to the netherworld's gaping maw. At this moment, monsters continuously poured out from within, fanning out in all directions. In the pitch darkness of the abyss, large gold-red lights ignited, resembling two blood gold moons suspended in the gloom. Then, a second pair, a third pair, and a fourth pair of gold-red dragon pupils appeared in succession. The deep gaze of these pupils seemed to peer at the distant Red Mountain City from hundreds of miles away. Delicious food, I am getting somewhat impatient. But the Ice Burial Duke forbids us to act prematurely, for fear of alarming the prey. Another crimson dragon spoke, yearning for blood yet cautious. Where have we alarmed the prey? Don't talk nonsense with your eyes open. The first crimson dragon pointed at the monsters continuously heading outside and said, Look, these little guys have been pouring into the Twilight Dominion even before we arrived. Since the prey is already alarmed, it's only right that we catch a few to sample, isn't it? Enjoy new tales from Empire. The speaking Crimson Dragon pondered for a moment and then altered his statement, we're just here because we discovered the anomaly and came to investigate. Squashing one or two insects that dare to resist us seems even more justifiable, doesn't it? That's perfectly reasonable. The several Crimson Dragons, sniffing the rich aura of living beings from afar, could no longer contain themselves. Their enormous forms burst forth from the dark void, roaring toward the distance. These monsters are indeed somewhat abnormal. Yuan stated, standing on a tower not far from the city walls, gazing toward the distant battle. Not long ago, he had received reports from Deng Long and several other elites, all mentioning that the monsters they fought had some issues. They were very clumsy. The strength, speed, and trump cards of the high-order monsters weren't bad, almost comparable to third-order and fourth-order bosses encountered in the wild. They were extremely bloodthirsty, recklessly fearless, and their combat instincts were above par, but they lacked tactics. Monsters that excelled in head-on charges did just that, and those adept at sneak attacks used the shadowy tactics that were nearly templated. Deng Long and many had fought high-order monsters before, and compared to intelligent monsters that knew how to coordinate, feint, shoot from hiding spots, and employ numbers to their advantage, these monsters fell short by a lot. Indeed, these monsters do not seem to have wisdom. Added the president of Zhongcheng, who was also a veteran frequent on the front lines and an immensely experienced fighter. He had noticed something was off about the monsters but had no time to think about it during the fierce battle. The city lord of Red Mountain was completely baffled. What was not right? How could such ferocious monsters be considered weak? But one was a representative of the younger generation, and the other a seasoned veteran. If both said so, it must be true. The city lord of Red Mountain pondered, why hadn't he, the lord and the person who should be most aware of the battle situation, noticed anything amiss? This was not his fault. The city lord of Red Mountain and his division generals simply did not have much experience dealing with high-order monsters. This was not the case with the elites of Tianyuan. After battles such as the Wolf Head Mountain Fortress, the defense of Tianyuan City, several campaigns to obliterate overlords, and dozens of large-scale tribal extermination campaigns. While the awareness of Tianyuan elites might not have been awakened for long, their battle experience, especially their knowledge of high-order monsters, was indeed ample. Zhang Cheng said, on closer thought, the attack of the waves outside the city doesn't have any pattern at all. It seems like there isn't a mastermind behind the waves. Mu Yuan asked, has there been a similar case in the past? Zhang Cheng thought for a moment. During the peak of the red fog disaster moon, during the period when the scarlet mist tide surged south, there were some similar cases where many high-order monsters, under the influence of the red mist, would lose their rationality and instead become more bloodthirsty and ferocious. But right now, it didn't fit this situation. The sky was still clear blue, with no ominous red moon hanging high. Nor had the monsters become more ferocious. During the period of the disaster moon, the monsters' intelligence would decrease but they would become more aggressive, actually making them more difficult to deal with than usual. During the disaster moon period, some fourth-order monsters would not be completely devoid of rationality, just a bit dimmer. Zhang Cheng added, furthermore, some high-order monsters that have just been born, just like some of our newly recruited high-order troops, are either quite unintelligent or have not yet developed intelligence. You all should be clear on this. The city lord of Red Mountain City was still confused, but Mu Yuan understood clearly. Ilo had once wanted to research this topic, but with too many things to handle, the project was shelved and there was no further progress. Duo Lai had devoured some red mist but couldn't make heads or tails of it either. Mu Yuan said, but high-order monsters only appear in places rich with red mist, like the land of filth during the red fog disaster moon, or the nest of filth. And besides, Mu Yuan had some speculations in his heart, but he couldn't be sure. The monster tide had appeared abruptly. They were like continuous giant waves, with some periods of decreased frequency of monster attacks, but ultimately, the waves were unceasing and there seemed to be no end in sight. Mu Yuan continued to lead his army in defense here. He didn't need to continuously defend, as the intensity of the monster tide and its strange emergence had already drawn the attention of the officials. After all, this was the heartland of the alliance. The reinforcements dispatched by the officials of Panxi City would take over the defense of Red Mountain City. They needed to hold out until the official reinforcements from Panxi City could arrive. Mission: support Red Mountain City, completed. Mission: defend and assist in investigating the surroundings of Red Mountain City, in progress. These were official support, defense, and investigation missions issued by the combined report from the officials of Tian City and Panxi City, published by Tai Xianlianji. One was a 1-star mission, the other tentatively rated 2 stars. The star level was equivalent to the star level of missions of the Pioneer Group, and contributions and merits from the missions could also be accumulated within the Pioneer Group's system. And a mission with 1 or 2 stars was certainly not low. Leaders like Lord Bian and others could probably only receive ordinary missions that did not yield merits. An official pioneering mission, even at just 1 star, mostly meant dealing with the legendary realm, or a possible direct encounter with the legendary. Missions in the Pioneer Group's battle zones would often start at 1 star. However, most new recruits to the Pioneer Group typically could only take on group-oriented 1-star missions. Originally, when he had discovered and prevented the establishment of the Heart of Corruption, it was no more than a 3.5-star mission. These 2 missions were issued by the Tai Xianlianji branch in Tian City, and were not handed directly to him. He couldn't be reached. Mu Yuan had gotten in touch with Tai Xianlianji's branch through Tian Yuan's representative in Tian City and had clarified the situation. He was walking on the city wall, looking around. Boom! The booming sound came from afar. Find your next read on Empire. He saw the surging tides of heaven and earth and a red giant dragon stirring up a storm of flames. A molten steel WIRM. Mu Yuan judged in a glance. This molten steel WIRM wasn't a true giant dragon, its bloodline as pure as old Jiang's 2-headed flying dragon, with the difference that this molten steel WIRM had stepped into the legendary realm. It was 20 to 30 meters long, with wings unfurled that burned with fierce flames. Its scales were like steel, shining brightly within the flames. On the back of the legendary realm molten steel WIRM stood a tall, slender figure. I am Long Tianjun, Lord Long Tian, specially here to provide support, said the figure on the dragon's back. Lord Long Tian received the call for help not long ago, but as he was already in the area and rode a powerful mount like the legendary realm molten steel WIRM, he arrived here faster than others. His gaze swept over the surroundings and, seeing Red Mountain City was not in urgent danger, he couldn't help but mutter, am I still 1 step too late? After all, being a step late meant he wasn't the main force of the reinforcements, and he would earn less in terms of contributions and honors. Yet, his decision to come to the rescue wasn't entirely for the sake of those merits. The molten steel Wirm did not fly into Red Mountain City. Lord Longtian stood on the dragon's back, his gaze passing over the hastily arriving Lord of Red Mountain City and then settling on a tall figure in the distance. Tian Yuan. He looked over and said, "Since Red Mountain City already has your strong support, I won't stay here. I will investigate the source of the monster tide." With those words, the molten steel Wirm flapped its wings and soared into the sky. Mu Yuan touched his nose and pondered for a while, "Who is this?" Ilo, who had somehow appeared next to him, adjusted her intellectual-looking round glasses and said in a voice like someone reading a report, "Lord Longtian, a famous leader in the advanced stages of dragon cancer, has spent a fortune developing an excellence-grade dragon flight squadron. He himself has also fused with some high-grade dragon bloodline. Records show that Lord Longtian has 2 legendaries in his family, with another 2 epic strong figures currently in training. This is the information available publicly. It's worth mentioning that Lord Longtian entered the Eternal World only 6 years ago, and he is a top figure among the leaders of the same period. He has also represented Taishan in the contests of Dragon Court." He wanted to say something, but for a moment he didn't know how to spit out the annoyance that filled him. But to be honest, wasn't Lord Longtian being a bit rash? How could he dare to explore deep into the monster tide without any clear understanding of the situation? Were all the lords of Dragon Sky so brave? Suddenly, boom! A dazzling flame light exploded in the distant azure sky. Within the flame light, a huge orange giant dragon was seen plunging from the sky, dragging flame and smoke behind it. Following closely was a shadow even more colossal than a legendary realm molten steel Wirm, several times larger in fact, revealing its body amidst the dust. A true giant dragon, overlooking the insignificant Wirm. A crimson dragon. Mu Yuan's pupils slightly contracted. He was all too familiar with them. His division generals had slain no small number of crimson dragons. Crimson dragons are not common because they are not a regular monster, but a special being constructed, revived and fused by the monsters of the Eternal Life faction of TNG occupying the dragon corpses. Therefore, this sudden surge of monsters could very likely be. Now was not the time to think about these things. Duo Lai. 17. Leave it to me. Duo Lai rode the storm, a small figure tearing a mighty white rift in the expanse between heaven and earth. But faster than Duo Lai were 17's arrows. Within a 40-kilometer range, that was the truth of 17. At that moment, Lord Longtian, grasping the ridge of the molten steel Wirm, merged man and dragon. As the Wirm descended to low altitude, its body abruptly flipped and soared into the sky once more. Is this the mastermind controlling the tide? He glanced at Red Mountain City in the distance. How could I possibly lose here, to a mere monster of legend, a giant dragon no less? Lord Longtian was ablaze, his momentum scaling new heights, the molten steel Wirm equally fearless, its entire body enveloped in roaring flames. Fighting 2 against 1, he was confident he wouldn't lose to a legendary giant dragon. However, heaven and earth trembled. A mist of blood gathered from all directions in the heavens and the earth, forming a second, a third, a fourth crimson dragon. The gaze of 8 golden red dragons' eyes fell upon him. In an instant, Lord Longtian broke out in a cold sweat. He was surrounded by danger. He fell from the sky once again. Whoosh! Arrows tore through the sky, unabashedly brilliant, star-studded arrows. One after another, forming a 9-star sequence. The arrows of stars repelled the crimson dragons. Lord Longtian finally had a moment to breathe. Right, with Lord Tianyuan from Red Mountain City at my side, together we could repel these dragons. Lord Tianyuan's reinforcement had arrived. The girl with blue hair rode upon a flying slime, wielding a small winged staff. She pointed the staff forward. Lord Longtian focused intently. He had to seize the opportunity for a perfect collaboration. Crack, crack, crack. In front of the staff's direction, space fractured into a spider web of cracks, spreading tens, hundreds of meters instantly, appearing abruptly and expanding rapidly. One of the crimson dragons, like an insect, was trapped within the spatial web. Crack! The scales of the crimson dragon shattered, its flesh carved chunk by chunk, blood gushing forth as it struggled fiercely. It let out an angry roar, roar. Crack! Enjoy exclusive content from Empire. Space finally shattered completely, collapsing inwards. Sand, debris, broken trees, flying rocks. Fractured scales, severed limbs, mangled flesh, a decapitated head with bulging eyes. All were sucked into the collapsing space. Only darkness remained, deep and black hole-like, the shattered space slowly mending under the action of the heaven and earth rules. And in front of the broken space, the plump girl stood with her staff, its tip lightly tapping. Chapter 464. War Zone Establishment, the Red Mountain City Lord's Gratitude Gift. Lord Long Tian's pupils suddenly constricted, and the motion he had been preparing to coordinate with, already charged with power, froze mid-air. The enemies had all perished, their remains swallowed by the collapsing space, so what cooperation was there to speak of? However, he stared into the distance at the seemingly harmless young girl in the sky, unable to stop the tremors in his pupils. Cold sweat even began to slide down his forehead. Too terrifying, too violent. Read latest chapters on Empire. No wonder. No wonder he, despite being selected for the parade, could only appear early as an appetizer, while Tian Yuan's demeanor and lineup were far superior to his. He was not convinced at first. Now, he had no choice but to be convinced. This single officer was worth more than 10,000 elite soldiers. Duo Lai, holding her staff, found her hand frozen in mid-air. Cold sweat faintly broke out on her forehead. It seemed she had used too much power. Alternatively, the enemy seemed to be too fragile. Of course, she had held back her strength, otherwise, she could have easily crushed space into a black hole, not giving the Crimson Dragon a chance to struggle. But she was uncertain if there were legendary monsters lurking in the shadows, nor could she be sure if the enemy had more and stronger reinforcements on the way. Naturally, she couldn't unleash her full power. This was the official explanation from the Lord. Duo Lai couldn't be bothered to think too much. After all, there must be some reason for the Lord's request, and she just needed to follow it. She did as told, but it seemed there was a slight mishap. It was all because the Crimson Dragon was too weak. Despite being a giant dragon, it only seemed a little stronger than a normal legendary creature. These dragons were indeed nowhere near as formidable as the peak creatures of the heaven and earth realm encountered by the Tian Yuan officers in the 10 Directions Island domain. The domains of the other 3 dragons spread out within a radius of 2,000 to 3,000 meters. Their domains enveloped all directions of heaven and earth and also included the area where Duo Lai was located. But even though Duo Lai had not activated her domain, as these 3 domains spread to her, they seemed to encounter an invisible force, unable to cross the line. The 3 dragons fixed their golden red, majestic, bloodthirsty and indifferent eyes on Duo Lai. Deep in their eyes, there was an imperceptible panic. Duo Lai chuckled nervously, pretending that her hand holding the staff was trembling. Right. She suddenly thought, some special moves either have severe side effects or have a long cooldown period. My recent move had such a big presence, it's clearly a very, very special move that can be used only once in a battle. 17, Xi Lu, Lian Yu, and Yuda all had such moves. The more she thought about it, the more reasonable it seemed. But her own reason seemed to be of no use. One of the Crimson Dragons spoke, "Don't panic, a move like that must have serious limitations or side effects. Don't be fooled by this human, she's just bluffing, already drained of strength." The second Crimson Dragon glanced over, "Yeah, right, she's out of power now, strike now." Duo Lai, yes, you're absolutely right." This creature was quite observant too. Again, Duo Lai couldn't help but think, was it her acting that had taken effect? Worthy of a general like her. The third Crimson Dragon roared furiously, "Attack!" It condensed its domain, fusing power into its own body. Its massive figure soared through the sky, forming a condensely carved, blood-colored giant claw, patterns clearly seen on it. The cloud-like claw obscured the sun. The Crimson Dragon, seeing that the human was still not dodging, maybe lacking the strength to evade, couldn't help but shout, "You too, quickly!" The third Crimson Dragon suddenly felt something was amiss. A glance at the corner of its eye caught sight of 2 speeding away blood-colored dots whose presence was almost gone. Third Crimson Dragon. Its attack hesitated, and in front of it, frighteningly violent thunder and fire erupted in the sky. Its body was engulfed and burnt in despair-inducing flames and lightning. Above the sky, Duo Lai wiped the non-existent cold sweat. Finally, it's over. This general is exhausted. Lord Long Tian, mounted on the legendary realm Molten Steel Wyrm, nodded in empathy. Just now, he had desperately intercepted one of the Crimson Dragons, while another Tianyuan city officer skilled in arrow skills continuously sniped at another. The Zhang city lord too had joined the battle from afar. Thus, they managed to annihilate all 4 crimson dragons right here. Even though in the enemy's fight to the death, both he and the molten steel Wirm sustained some minor injuries, this was a splendid victory over 4 crimson dragons. Light injuries, even severe ones, were worth it. But, thank goodness that the Tianyuan officer intervened in time, stopping the crimson dragons from exploding. Otherwise, Ran Gang and I might have been seriously hurt. Speaking of which, that Tianyuan officer intervened several times decisively and promptly. Lord Long Tian looked toward the Tianyuan general not far away who also seemed exhausted. Somehow, he felt that the Tianyuan general had strength to spare. Like they were fishing. Illusion, it must be an illusion. Her domain spanning 2,900 meters was fully deployed, and she even used several wide-range attack techniques in succession, each could be considered a devastating move. With such terrifying energy output, any other legendary would have been depleted several times over. How could Tianyuan general still have energy left? After the assassination of the 4 crimson dragons, no more legendary realm monsters appeared. Lord Long Tian said nothing about venturing out for further scouting but instead stayed obediently within Red Mountain City, waiting for more reinforcements to arrive. Nearly 10 lords gathered together. Zhang City Lord spoke up, the crimson dragons might represent the monster power from Dragon Sleep Valley. If the wave truly originated from there, then this matter is beyond us. Let's see what the officials from Panchi City and Lake Haven have to say. Lord Dragon Sky stroked his stubble. Dragon Sleep Valley. I've long heard of this monster power as a top-tier overlord power, one that desecrates the remains of dragons, an unforgivable monstrous force. Mu Yuan. Speaking of desecrating dragon remains, I'm quite good at it too. Deadbone doesn't even know how many dragon corpses it has picked up. He said, the direct lineage force of Dragon Sleep Valley is a kind of creature that occupies giant dragon corpses and then grows flesh and blood upon this foundation. I've just inspected it, and found that the extinguished crimson dragon, its flesh and skeleton do not share the same origin, and as far as I know, the bodies of many legendary realm crimson dragons are indeed not fully integrated. There's a 98% chance, the enemy is Dragon Sleep Valley, and it's very likely that a passageway leading to the depths of the wilderness, or even the Red Mist Land, has appeared west of Red Mountain City. Lord Dragon Sky glanced at him. How come you are so skilled? No, how are you so familiar with this? Even if you are a strong warrior, you're still a greenhand in the pioneer group, right? Indeed, Mu Yuan was a greenhand in the pioneer group, a greenhand commander of the Great War Zone, a commander of a special war zone, an old friend of Dragon Sleep Valley, and Lord Xiaodeng, whose establishment only had slightly over a year. However, when Xi Lu fought with the Crimson Dragon, she discovered that the souls and bodies of these giant dragons were not fully integrated. Xi Lu was naturally a nemesis to Dragon series creatures, and her Dragon Feast talent gave her the ability to directly harm the souls of any Dragon series life forms. In her battle with the Crimson Dragon, her soul special attack was even enhanced, making her truly a Crimson Dragon Slayer. This was evidence of the Crimson Dragon's body and soul not fully integrated. If they had been fully integrated, Xi Lu's Dragon Feast talent would not have been able to produce such an exaggerated effect. After that, the intensity of the monster wave slightly subsided. No legendary realm monsters showed up again, nor did any war machines appear. Under these circumstances, Red Mountain City, with several legendary realm beings stationed there, was as secure as a fortress. Before long, the first batch of reinforcements from Panchi City, the Heaven and Earth Realm Peak Strongman Sword Saint Tianhe, arrived. He came ahead of all others by himself. Another Heaven and Earth Realm Peak Strongman, Great Stone Lord, leading a legion, was on his way here by steel train. I heard the enemy has retreated and a Crimson Dragon has appeared. Sword Saint Tianhe arrived, treading upon a magnanimous river of swords. He was like a sword immortal of this world, the epitome of elegance and power. As a celebrated warrior of Panchi City, Sword Saint Tianhe's military exploits were impressive, with countless creatures falling under his sword. Mu Yuan knew Sword Saint Tianhe. In the campaign surprise attack on Dragon Sleep Valley, Sword Saint Tianhe was one of the participants, having made a brief stop for supplies at Tianyuan City. Even earlier, Mu Yuan had encountered Sword Saint Tianhe from a distance. Once when Deadbone was in the wild and saw Sword Saint Tianhe pursuing the Goblin Prince. Another time at the borderland, where Sword Saint Tianhe forcefully repelled foreign warriors. At that time, Sword Saint Tianhe was an extremely powerful being, well beyond Dead Bone's capability to match even a fraction. But now, the rumors said Sword Saint Tianhe had made the leap into the peak of heaven and earth realm, and he had improved substantially. Yuan City had improved even more. Even setting aside the increase in combat power, based simply on level and domain radius, Yuan City was in possession of 4 heaven and earth realm peak strong men, Dead Bone, Duo Lai, Ilo, and Tree Demon Granny. Without realizing it, I've also amassed a not-so-weak force. Following the arrival of Sword Saint Tianhe, more reinforcements continued to reach the city. Lord of Scorching Flames, Lord Giant Elephant, Oak City Lord. The small Red Mountain city hosted one powerful lord after another. The city lord of Red Mountain was bustling around tirelessly. At this time, the urgent rescue mission for Red Mountain City had already been called off. However, there were still some strong warriors who traveled great distances to arrive. A middle-aged lord riding a red dragon reached this place. This was Red Mountain City's backer, the chairman of Red Dragon Group. Before long, Great Stone Lord leading a 1,000-man legion, finally arrived. The legion was stationed in Red Mountain City to assist in defense and began clearing the now sparse waves outside the city. Great Stone Lord said, "We will conduct a detailed investigation into this incident. This matter may still require the assistance of all lords. The star rating for the investigation task and the accolades granted will be determined based on the investigation results." After all, Dragon Sleep Valley was involved, and Panchi City, among other official cities, had all consecutively offered support. The Pioneer Group also prepared to send strong reinforcements. The investigation had not encountered any accidents. It was actually smoother than imagined, as they quickly had preliminary and direct findings. An underground hollow. Explore more stories with Empire. Sword Saint Tianhe said, "The hollow is mysterious, leading to another domain. This domain is not the Red Mist land, but the mist of the Red Mist floating about in the heaven and earth realm is not scarce. It is possible that Dragon Sleep Valley has already established a vanguard army base in the opposing domain. We must remove this base. Of course, this is not something we can do just by ourselves. This will be a major development task, calling together many frontier lords. This area will also be temporarily designated as a Great War Zone." What he didn't say was that if they, Panchi City, could not remove the vanguard base of Dragon Sleep Valley, and the war entered into a stalemate, this Great War Zone might have to exist permanently. After all, this time, they had lost the initiative, and no one knew how much preparation Dragon Sleep Valley had done. This was very unfavorable news for Panchi City. Luckily, Panchi City was now much stronger than before. If it had been in the past, the emergence of this passage could have led to the total collapse of Panchi City's defenses, and Panchi City and Tian City might have vanished. The war has come again. The war has never vanished. Yuan murmured, gazing outside the city. He had arrived in the Eternal World a little over a year ago, but the disasters he had encountered and witnessed were already too numerous to count. So he must become stronger. Yuan City must become strong enough to stand unshaken no matter what disaster it faced. And at present, they were not yet strong enough. Facing the mighty Dragon Sleep Valley, Yuan City was far from qualified for a head-on confrontation. Ilo came over and said, "Lord, Red Mountain City Lord has just sent a gift of thanks. I thought that in case you were too modest to refuse, I took the liberty of accepting it on your behalf." Yuan. "Let me see." She handed over a storage ring and continued. "Inside are 2 pieces of excellence-grade equipment, as well as 11 title deeds. 10 of them are the title deeds of Red Mountain City, including a manor, a tea plantation, and 2 taverns. The other one is a title deed of Panchi City. I checked, and the title deed is located on Panstone Street in Panchi City, covering a sizable area, possessing considerable value. Currently, all the offices, shops, and residences of Yuan City in the various cities are rented. He can't afford to buy them. At least not all of them. The Red Mountain City Lord gave a core area title deed of Panchi City, which is quite a gesture. As for the other title deeds of Red Mountain City, even with businesses like taverns, their value is still far from comparable to that of the Panchi City title deed. In the Eternal World, the real estate industry is polarized, with the expensive being exorbitantly expensive and in high demand, while some territories' real estate can't be sold even at fire sale prices. However, in the future, Red Mountain City will also be at the front line of the Great War Zone. Maybe the properties will appreciate in value. Yuan didn't care. Whether or not the Red Mountain City Lord gave a gift, he didn't mind. He didn't come for the gifts, although he wouldn't refuse them either. He also guessed the Red Mountain City Lord's thoughts. The war zone establishment won't be an issue if one sends some of the elites from their own forces. Fighting monsters, after all, is the same everywhere. At this time, an emergency meeting of the Pioneer Group had been convened. We can almost confirm that this time the enemy is Dragon Sleep Valley. They want to bypass the Longshan Pass defensive line. Just in case, let's establish a temporary Great War Zone to stop the enemy's advance. So, the question is, how many lords should we call for this temporary Great War Zone, and who should command them? Chapter 465. Yuan City also enters a state of combat readiness. After the Red Mountain City incident, Yuan hastened to a nearby official town and took the steel train to arrive at Panxi City. And here, Yuan went directly through the Starry Sky Gate and returned to the long-missed Yuan territory. Our territory may not be bustling, but indeed, it surpasses the big cities outside by thousands, even tens of thousands of times. Although he had been traveling for a month or two, he still had a crystal-clear understanding of the situation of his own territory. During this time, the 10 Directions Island domain had been relatively calm. No, that's not quite accurate to say. A month and a half ago, the most northern medium-sized soul sand mine was assaulted by a large monster tide initiated by the remnants of the Black Crow clan. 1 month ago, a wandering monster from the legendary realm appeared in the 10 Directions Island domain, a lava giant beast over 60 meters tall. The lava giant beast had barely appeared before it encountered an exploratory team from Yuan. Afterward, it was besieged and slain by the Yuan team with the help of summoned allies. 16 days ago, a nest of filth emerged in the northern border of the 10 Directions Island domain, spewing out hundreds, even thousands of high-order monsters, with the tidal wave roaring in. The nest of filth existed for less than 2 days before it was annihilated. Continue reading on Empire. 10 days ago, an assassin from the outside world, likely coming through the Shenluo domain passageway, tried to infiltrate the core area of Yuan City, but was captured on the spot by the patrol team. This assassin possessed the combat power of a 4-order peak, employed by an intermediary, with the true instigator still unclear. For an ordinary territory, many of these incidents would already be considered major catastrophes. A wandering legendary realm monster could easily obliterate a territory, even if it were a city-level territory. A newly born nest of filth, if not eradicated in time, could also turn vast areas into lands of death. For Yuan territory a year ago, these disasters would have been enough to threaten the stability of the territory, but now, they were merely a breeze. This is the meaning of growing stronger. No matter the terrifying waves, I myself will crush them. Amid such tranquility, Yuan felt particularly pleased handling the trivial affairs that had gradually piled up. He quickly stamped dozens of documents, approving the paperwork that had accumulated over the days. Suddenly, his assistant Mo Li reported to his office, "Lord, an issue has arisen at the realm passageway at the western border's end. The observation team reports that a large number of wild monsters have emerged there. 10 Directions Island domain, western extreme." The Yuan City's special exploratory team for realm passageways had discovered a pathway leading to outer realms here. Afterward, Sophia personally crossed the realm passageway to investigate, verifying it was an island domain sparse with monsters, but equally scarce in resources and visibly fractured earth, likely a worthless domain. With plenty of areas in the 10 Directions Island domain waiting for Yuan City to explore and exploit, Yuan naturally had no intention to develop this seemingly barren island domain. He simply deployed several elite exploratory teams for a rudimentary survey of the domain and constructed an observation outpost in a concealed location outside the realm passageway. He established outposts at the northern, southern, and eastern ends of the realm passageways. Some were built overtly, while others were hidden. The outposts couldn't detect everything. They missed the approach of the faceless ones at the northern outpost, which wasn't their fault. But now, the outpost at the western extreme had noticed a very conspicuous situation. "Hurry, hurry, report this immediately." The leader of the observation outpost was a lieutenant of Yuan City, Bone 7, born from the Lord of Death Remains, who also gave himself the human name Bone 07. Bone 07 stood on a hillock surveying the landscape. Black fog enveloped the hillock, seeming to sever it from the world. The monster tide spilling out from the passageway had not detected the scent of life here and spread out towards more distant areas. Adjacent was Bone 33, who said, "Quiet. I'm already reporting it. In just a short moment, the warriors linked by the spiritual link network had a premonition. He was coming. Bone 07 knelt on one knee. I welcome the arrival of Lord. Bone 33 said, Lord, welcome to the inspection. As Mu Yuan's spiritual link connected to this channel, his gaze, too, fell through the rare level watchtower built here. He saw several self-made burial mounds, a massive bird's nest, along with some constructed arrow towers and multi-shot arrow towers. But his view was limited to this point, and even from a high vantage, he could not see the distant scenery beyond the watchtower's reach. His vision was only of a vast white expanse. The rare level watchtower's coverage spanned only a few hundred meters at best. Let me handle this. This is where Mr. Bird's power comes into play. A cyan figure soared into the sky. It rose only a few tens of meters, not beyond the range of the black fog. Surrounded by a light cyan wind, its eyes took on the brilliant hue of azure gemstones. The years-old divine skill vision sharing transmitted via the spiritual link talent reached Mu Yuan thousands of kilometers away in the Tianyuan territory. Three perspectives appeared before Mu Yuan's eyes. His own view, the overhead perspective of the watchtower, and the observational view of the Winged Wind King at the outpost. Through the sharp eyes of the Winged Wind King, Mu Yuan's gaze pierced through the black fog and glimpsed the hordes of monsters thundering forward in packs. And further off, a desolate landscape with no signs of life, the land beaten and exceptionally smooth due to the constant energy tides, empty and vast. Monster figures appeared at the edge of his vision. The frenzied elements of heaven and earth converged, forming a tangible tidal wave that crashed down upon the earth. Boom! Countless monsters were turned into mincemeat in the energy tide, washed away by the giant wave to farther places, leaving only fragments of their mangled corpses dotting the landscape, bobbing in the wake of the waves. Yet, many more monsters burst from the waves, shrieking and howling as they rushed toward this land teeming with life that beckoned to them. Mu Yuan frowned. The energy tide, it's weakening, and it's still declining. Is it because the monsters are also constantly charging and bombarding, reducing the frenzied energy between heaven and earth with their sheer numbers? This was not impossible. The law of conservation of energy didn't apply in a fantasy world, but in specific situations, energy conservation still mattered somewhat. Just like duolai, eating voraciously after substantial expenditure. If the energy tide was merely a continuous crashing down, the elements that dissipated would return to heaven and earth and once again converge to form a tide, an endless cycle. But if the energy tide was constantly being consumed by monsters, then a reduction in its force seemed reasonable. It was unclear whether this was a temporary weakening or a permanent one. Mu Yuan speculated it was the former since the frenzied area involved certain natural laws of heaven and earth. However, he also noticed that with the movement of the monsters, the red mist threads drifting above this frenzied region seemed to be thicker than before. Unsure, he asked Bone 07, Bone 33, and the Wings of the Wind King for their opinions. Bone 07 rested his chin in hand and pondered, it does seem thicker. When it comes to critical moments, you have to rely on this girl. Bone 33 removed her helmet and took a crystal of image retain out of her own eye socket. I recorded the situation of the realm passageway with the crystal a long time ago. This one's from today, this one from 3 days ago, and this one contains footage from a week ago. By comparing with the crystal of image retain, indeed, the red mist threads drifting in this area had grown significantly thicker. Mu Yuan was impressed. His elite was truly reliable. However, red mist drifting, monster tides surging, this scene seems strangely familiar. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Sophia joined the channel, let me go scout out what's happened in the islands on the other side. Mu Yuan, okay, it's in your hands, be careful above all else. Sophia quickly brought back some bad news. Compared to her previous entries, there was a drastic change in the environment of the Shattered Isles on the other side of the passageway this time. There were numerous monsters, baring their teeth and screeching. The elements between heaven and earth were filled with an extremely dense red mist, and the azure sky was no longer visible, replaced by the faint sight of a red moon hanging high above. The root of corruption was sprouting, relentlessly invading the earth. In the distance, mountain ranges seemed as if they had turned into terrifying monsters under the erosion of the red mist. Sophia even discovered several blood-red giant dragons among them. Just as I thought. Mu Yuan muttered to himself. On the western side of Red Mountain City, just opposite the collapsed entrance to the underground caverns, was such an environment. A device of corruption had taken root, beginning to erode the land, almost turning the entire domain into the Red Mist Land. Yuan frowned. He couldn't help but suspect that this shattered island was the one right across the channel from Red Mountain City. The focus of Dragon Sleep Valley's offensive. Whether it is the island opposite Red Mountain City or not, we at Yuan City must once again face Dragon Sleep Valley, and this time, we must confront more of its forces. According to Tai Xian's long-standing experience, by resisting, including building fortifications, eliminating the tides, and slaying legends, we can curb the spread of the red mist erosion, but it's a cure for the symptoms, not the disease. The spread of the red mist's erosion seems to follow some unique rules too. The northern passageway remained uneroded by the red mist. Yet here, as monsters poured in, the number of wisps of red mist was increasing. An ominous sign. Outside Red Mountain City, the scene was much the same. It had to be stopped. The warning sirens of Yuan City rang once again. The entire city entered a state of battle readiness. Yuan harbored no thoughts of once again I'm the unlucky one. His consistent philosophy was, when catastrophe strikes, crush it. This time was no different. Yuan City faced a major disaster every 1 or 2 months, or every 2 or 3 months. It was not just him, the division generals, the elites, and even the citizens of Yuan City had all grown accustomed to it. Many elites were even sharpening their knives eagerly, brimming with excitement. Serio said, "War, this will be the stage for this dragon to prove himself. The enemies before were too few, hardly enough to fight." Jun remarked, "In the previous wars, Lord Jun couldn't step into legend and could only watch. This time it's different, Tianyuan's first speedster will officially take the stage." Xi Lu exclaimed, "Fighting in Dragon Sleep Valley again? This is really splendid. The giant dragons of Dragon Sleep Valley are so tasty." Read exclusive content at Empire. Duo Lai shouted, "Ah, fight, fight, fight." All of the above were representatives of the brainless in Yuan City. In contrast, figures like Ilo, the chief logistics officer, and Liu Lu, the grand commander of defense, had much more to consider. After all, Dragon Sleep Valley. Dragon Sleep Valley is no easy opponent. In Tian City, a meeting of the Pioneer Group was underway. Several exploration generals, a frontier commander, and a few other bigwigs not from the Pioneer Group, had gathered here in projected forms. However, there are numerous enemies in Dragon Sleep Valley. An island domain that has not yet completely transformed into Red Mist Land is even less likely to have many powerful beings from Dragon Sleep Valley stationed there. That's true, but our Tai Xian strong men each have their own domain to guard. Now that a new war zone is being established, our forces will be even more stretched. But the establishment of a new war zone is essential. We can issue a call to arms. A new war zone will certainly attract many aspiring frontier lords. At the very least, in this new war zone, we must halt the spread of the Red Mist Land. We cannot allow the opposing island domain to completely fall to the Red Mist, otherwise, we'll be too passive. So, who will command this new war zone? The speaking exploration general scanned the entire room. The position of war zone commander was crucial. Admittedly, whether a war zone can withstand the enemy's onslaught depends on the collaboration of many, not on any one person or territory. But a war zone commander can exercise authority and amass the strength of the crowd, playing a significant role at critical moments. An outstanding war zone commander can also serve as a role model to boost morale, or be adept at command, utilizing the authority of the war zone to the utmost. In short, even though for most of the time, each lord is responsible for their own defense area and minds their own business, the choice of a commander remains a matter of utmost caution. Moreover, this new war zone will face Dragon Sleep Valley head-on, far from being one of the less significant minor war zones. At least it's a medium-sized war zone. Depending on the situation, the rank of the war zone might even rise. The lead exploration general looked towards a young man seated to his right. "Green Mountain, how about you take on the role of this commander?" "Ah? Me?" The young man was flabbergasted. "Me, fighting in Dragon Sleep Valley? I will lead the troops to the war zone to intercept the enemy, but to be in charge of the entire battlefield, I'm afraid I don't have sufficient capability." The exploration general sighed slightly. Lord Green Mountain was a relatively young but already quite powerful lord. With his glorious record of achievements, he had reached the 5th star as a frontier lord and commanded numerous fierce generals and elite troops. In the view of the exploration general, considering strength, experience, and merit, Lord Green Mountain was fully qualified to command this war zone. He was the most suitable candidate. All other potential candidates either fell short in terms of experience or were spread too thin to be considered. But despite his prowess, Lord Green Mountain lacked confidence in himself, always feeling inadequate. If Green Mountain lacked confidence, the Exploration General couldn't directly appoint him. A commander needs to be steady but must not lack confidence. Let's report our discussion to headquarters and issue a call to arms for now. Our immediate priority is to stop the spread of the red mist and prepare for any surprise attacks from Dragon Sleep Valley. After that, we'll consider stabilizing the front and the possibility of a counter-offensive.